Chapter 1078. Song Hushing had always thought that Qin Sheng was not worthy of Song Ruyu at all. Even most of the young talents in Sijio City were not worthy of her. It seemed that only an excellent man like him could be worthy of Ruyu. Therefore, he did not care about the so-called rich playboys introduced by his family. He even strictly checked on his sister. Fortunately, his sister did not like those rich playboys at all. However, he did not expect that his sister would choose Qin Sheng in the end. Qin Sheng was far inferior to those rich playboys and young talents. If he had known this, he would have chosen them. More importantly, Qin Sheng had always been a womanizer. He knew quite a few women who had ambiguous relationships with him. However, this did not stop his sister from choosing Qin Sheng. Song Hushing could not figure out what was going on. It was not until the day of the engagement that he understood. Although Song Hushing still wanted to stop this marriage, the resentment in his heart had lessened a lot. Perhaps as time passed and their relationship became closer, he slowly let it go. However, he did not expect that Qin Sheng would still be entangled with his former woman after being engaged to Ruyu. How could Song Hushing tolerate it? Song Ruyu had not seen Qin Sheng for a long time. Although they would call or video call every day, women in love could only quench their thirst at the sight of the plum blossoms. If it were not for the fact that she was going to be transferred here soon and had some handover procedures, she might have taken time to visit Qin Sheng in Shenzhen during this period. Today, the organization just talked to her. She would leave here soon. She had been here since graduation. She was reluctant to leave so suddenly. When she came back from middle office, she received a call from Song Hushing. Song Hushing had not called her for a long time, although their relationship had eased a lot. As long as Song Hushing did not continue to entangle with Qin Sheng, their relationship would still be the same as before. After all, this brother cared about her more than anyone else. However, she did not expect that after answering the phone, Song Hushing directly said, "Did you know that Qin Sheng went to Ningbo?" It was Qin Sheng again. Song Ruyu instantly lost her temper. But when did Qin Sheng go to Ningbo? Why did she not know? Qin Sheng did not tell her. It seemed that Qin Sheng was still in Shenzhen yesterday. Why did he suddenly go to Ningbo? Why did Qin Sheng suddenly go to Ningbo when the Qin family was in a terrible fix in Shenzhen? Based on her understanding of Qin Sheng, it was obvious that he did not go to find Lin Su. Moreover, she had long known that Lin Su had gone to the United States last year and had not come back until now. It was impossible for her to come back so suddenly. The only explanation was that something must have happened to the Lin family. Song Ruyu replied slowly, "I know." Upon hearing Qin Sheng's words, Song Hushing was stupefied for a moment. He was somewhat surprised, but then he figured it out. It seemed that Qin Sheng had told his sister about this matter on his own initiative. Otherwise, he would not have dared to go to Ningbo. If his sister knew about this, their relationship would definitely fall apart. He must have gone to Ningbo with his sister's approval. Moreover, it was also because of old Lady Lin's death. Based on his understanding of his sister, she would not be so stingy and would definitely let Qin Sheng go there. At this time, Song Hushing somewhat regretted making this call. It would only make his sister think that he was meddling in other people's business. He also secretly cursed Su Xingwei, who was watching the fun and did not care about the consequences. Su Xingwei was really wicked. He actually used him as a tool. He would never forget this matter. Song Hushing was a little worried and asked again, "Did Qin Sheng tell you about it?" Song Ruyu said calmly, "Yes, he did." "Okay, I got it. I'm hanging up." Song Hushing dared not to continue the conversation, for fear that his sister would get angry again. After all, he had been paying attention to this matter, and their relationship also fell apart because of this. Before Song Ruyu continued to say something, Song Hushing had already hung up the phone. After putting away the phone, Song Ruyu was lost in thought. What on earth happened to the Lin family in Ningbo? Otherwise, why would Qin Sheng go there in such a hurry? After hesitating for a while, she wanted to call and ask which friend of hers was in Ningbo and could get in touch with the Lin family. After a while, she thought of a female classmate who was from a famous private enterprise in Ningbo. Although it was not the kind of enterprise that everyone knew, it was still a well-known one in the local area. After making sure, she directly dialed the number. When the phone was connected, she first politely exchanged some greetings. After that, she directly asked about the Lin family. That friend was somewhat curious about why Song Ryu suddenly asked about the Lin family. Did it have something to do with the Lin family? Why hadn't Song Ryu mentioned it before? However, she was just curious and didn't ask directly. She just answered truthfully, saying that the old lady of the Lin family had passed away and her father had gone to mourn for her yesterday. Hearing this news, Song Ryu was somewhat shocked. The old lady of the Lin family had passed away? At this time, Song Ryu figured out what on earth was going on. No wonder Qin Sheng suddenly went to Ningbo. She more or less knew the story between Qin Sheng and Lin Su. The old lady of the Lin family had been kind to Qin Sheng. Although he had separated from Lin Su, the old lady of the Lin family had passed away. No matter what, Qin Sheng should go to see her off. Moreover, she also knew Qin Sheng's character. As long as he knew this news, he would definitely go to Ningbo. However, Song Ryu was somewhat angry. Even if Qin Sheng wanted to go to Ningbo, he should have told her in advance. Was he afraid that she would not allow him to go to Ningbo? Was Song Ryu such an unreasonable person? However, Song Ryu didn't want to be angry with Qin Sheng now. She would definitely get even with Qin Sheng later. He had to give her a reasonable explanation, or she would not let it go so easily. In love, all women were like this, and Song Ryu was not exaggerating. In the Lin family, Ningbo, old lady Lin's funeral was still going on, but today, fewer guests came to pay their condolences. The Lin family could finally have a little rest. This kind of family affairs had always been quite tiring. Even ordinary families would be so busy, not to mention a big family like the Lin family. However, the Lin family was a big family, and there were so many people in the family that not a few elders would attend to everything personally. Night fell again. It was inexplicably windy outside. The weather forecast said that it would rain tonight, which gave the Lin family a headache. If it really rained, it would be a little troublesome for the old lady's funeral tomorrow. Now, they could only pray that it would not rain. The old lady had done good deeds all her life, and this last journey of her life should be smooth. However, the Lin family dared not put all their hopes on God. The open space in front of the main house had been set up with tents, and even a road with tents had been set up on the main road. In this way, even if it rained tomorrow, they would not be afraid of the funeral. Although it was a little troublesome, they did not need to worry about it in advance. Besides, they only needed to spend money, and the Lin family did not need to do anything in person. As for the cemetery, it was the same, just in case it rained tomorrow. At night, Qin Sheng almost did not sleep. He was also worried about the rain. On the one hand, it was a little inauspicious, and on the other hand, it was really troublesome. It was estimated that the Lin family was not sleepy, and many people were waiting. If it really rained in the middle of the night, the Lin family would be busy again. At that time, Qin Sheng could get up and help. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, Xue Qingyan sent a video call to Qin Sheng. It seemed that she was not with Lin Su, or she would not dare to send a video call to Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng asked directly, "Sister, how is it?" Lin Su did not find any clues, did she? Not yet, but she asked Lin Yu to video chat with the old lady. Lin Yu said that she had gone to Shanghai and could only video chat when she came back. Then she asked Lin Yu's mother. Lin Yu's mother said that the doctor did not allow the old lady to be disturbed, and she had to rest for a few days. These made her a little confused, but not suspicious. Xue Qingyan replied truthfully. Qin Sheng said helplessly, "Anyway, let's wait until tomorrow. When the old lady is buried, even if she knows it, she will not rush back." Xue Qingyan shook her head and said, "That's the only way." Qin Sheng continued, "When the old lady's funeral is over tomorrow, I will go to see Lin Su's mother. I have something to say to Annie. After all, I am sorry for Lin Su. I don't know when I will come to Ningbo next time. I should go to see Annie." Upon hearing Qin Sheng's words, Xue Qingyan was very pleased and said, "You should go to see her." Yesterday, Lin Su muttered that she dreamed of her mother. She must miss her. Unfortunately, she can't go back. You go to see her on behalf of Lin Su. She will be very happy if she knows it. Qin Sheng could not help but let out a long sigh. He hoped that he would not let Lin sue down in the future. After the conversation, Qin Sheng hung up the video call and said that he would contact her if there was anything. He, who was not sleepy, finally fell asleep unconsciously. It was not until 6 o'clock the next morning that he was disturbed by the noise outside. Qin Sheng suddenly woke up, afraid that he had fallen asleep. After all, today was the day of the old lady's funeral. He picked up his phone and looked at the time. Then he was relieved. However, he thought of the rain yesterday. He quickly got up, opened the window, and looked out. Although the sky outside was covered with dark clouds, it was not raining. He could not help but feel lucky. When Qin Sheng finished washing up and came out, the Lin family was already busy. There were many guests outside. Even the main road of the Lin family was full of all kinds of cars. These people came to see the old lady off for the last time. The old lady, who had worked hard all her life, should finish her last journey in glory. Qin Sheng, who was in mourning, followed the Lin family and was busy. Although the funeral procedure was a little complicated, it was all the rules in Ningbo. Big families like the Lin family paid the most attention to these rules, because they were afraid that it would be inauspicious and affect their descendants. At 7 o'clock sharp, several elders of the Lin family slowly walked out of the mourning hall, holding the old lady's coffin. Qin Sheng was among them. Outside, the direct and collateral relatives of the Lin family had already knelt on both sides and cried. This kind of atmosphere was extremely sad. People eat dirt for a lifetime, but dirt only eats people once. Who didn't live like this in this life? The old lady was on her way. Chapter 1079. Killing Intent in the Heavy Rain. Part 2. The Lin family hadn't seen such a scene for a long time. The last time was when Lin Zhe got married. At that time, the Lin family was in the limelight. The marriage made the Lin family famous. Almost everyone in Ningbo knew about it. The last time was when old Master Lin passed away. The scene at that time was not much worse than when old Madam passed away today. It was just that the Lin family was now on a higher level than before, and there were also the factors of the Qin family and Qin Sheng. Therefore, many big shots in the Yangtze River Delta who did not have much contact with the Lin family usually came to mourn. It could be said that they had given the Lin family enough face, so many people could not understand the Lin family. The Lin family thought the next time was when Lin Su got married. After all, the Qin family and Qin Sheng's background were here. At that time, it would definitely be an unprecedented event in Ningbo. However, they didn't expect that old Madam Lin would walk in front of them, which made the Lin family sigh with emotion. The old Madam Lin would feel sorry that she couldn't see her favorite granddaughter get married. The crowd walked out with the coffin in their hands. It was not until the coffin was placed on the hearse that the members of the Lin family got up and got on the hearse. Qin Sheng followed Lin Chongding and Lin Changhe into the hearse and stayed by old Madam Lin's side. Raising the coffin, the motorcade moved slowly. There were endless cars coming to see them off. There were traffic policemen on duty at every intersection. Fortunately, the Lin family's old house was in the suburbs. If it was in the downtown area, it might cause a great shock. However, the Lin family had a plan which was limited to Ningbo, so there wouldn't be any media reports. Later, except for the Lin family's motorcade, the other guests took a detour and went to the ancestral grave of the Lin family in advance. Anyway, it was a distance away, so they wouldn't be seen by too many people. Qin Sheng, who was sitting in the car, had not felt such a sorrowful atmosphere for a long time. The last time he felt this way was when his grandfather passed away. However, compared with the scene of old Madam Lin's funeral, old Master Qin's funeral seemed very shabby. He left this world quietly. Except for Qin Sheng, his biological grandson, no other immediate family members knew about it. Maybe not many people had the same ending as old Master Qin. He was born ordinary, lived a wonderful life, and died a peaceful death. That was the life of old Master Qin. Qin Sheng, let bygones be bygones. I don't expect you to do anything to me or the Lin family. I don't know how you and Susu are doing now. I just hope that you won't let her down. I'll let her down in this life. I owe her and her mother, and I won't have a chance to pay them back in this life. I just hope that she can be happy, Lin Chongting suddenly said without warning. Apart from the driver and the butler of the Lin family, who was sitting in the passenger seat, there was no one else. There were only Lin Chongting, Lin Chonghe, and Old Lady Lin's two nephews in the back car. Qin Sheng was the last one. Old Madam Lin's two nephews were about the same age as Lin Chongting and Lin Chonghe. One of them had retired as a director and had helped the Lin family a lot in the past. The other one was a professor at Zhejiang University and was still teaching there. After all, there were more scholarly families in Jiangsu and Zhejiang. They didn't know these trifles of the Lin family and didn't have much contact with Qin Sheng. They only knew that Qin Sheng was Lin Su's boyfriend. They also knew that Qin Sheng's identity and background were not simple. It was thanks to this man that the Lin family could survive until now. Hearing Lin Chongting's words, they were just stunned for a while and did not say anything. They continued to be lost in thought. Lin Chonghe was a little surprised and looked at Qin Sheng subconsciously. It did not occur to Qin Sheng that Lin Chongting would suddenly say something like this. It seemed that after coming to the Lin family this time, apart from greeting him, Lin Chongting almost did not say anything else. The conversation between them definitely did not exceed 10 sentences. Qin Sheng slowly raised his head, looked at Lin Chongting, and said, "Uncle Lin, I've forgotten what happened in the past. As for Lin Su, you don't have to worry about it. Lin Su has me in this life. As long as it's within my ability, I will give her the greatest happiness." Qin Sheng still had a lot of resentment towards Lin Chongting. This was not only because of Lin Chongting's attitude towards him in the past, but also because Lin Chongting had hurt Lin Su in this life. He really owed Lin Su too much. Just because he was old and changed his attitude towards Lin Su, did Qin Sheng have to be respectful to him? If a bad guy chose to be a good guy because he was old and couldn't bear the knife anymore, should we let him go? If this was really the case, the cost of being a bad guy was really too low. Why should we be a good guy? If this was really the case, the world would really be in chaos. Qin Sheng hated the saying of Buddhism the most: put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. A good guy needed to go through a lifetime of hardships and setbacks to become a Buddha, while a bad guy could become a Buddha as long as he put down the butcher's knife after doing bad things for his whole life. It was really King nonsense. Therefore, Qin Sheng had always been close to Taoism. Okay, Lin Chongting didn't know what to say, so he just nodded awkwardly. On the way, he didn't talk much. The two nephews of old Madam Lin didn't communicate much with Qin Sheng. They mostly chatted with Lin Chongting and Lin Chonghe, talking about the past of old Madam Lin. After nearly an hour's journey, the Lin family's motorcade finally arrived at the destination of this trip, the ancestral grave of the Lin family. The ancestral grave of the Lin family was against the mountain and facing the sea. There was also a small river in front of it, which had wind and gathered water. It was a good place with good feng shui. No wonder the Lin family could be so prosperous. Halfway up the mountain, Old Ghost and several of his brothers were staring at this place. Seeing that old Madam Lin's funeral was about to end, if they still couldn't find a chance, they could only return without accomplishing anything. At that time, it would be hard for them to explain to Elder Long. One of Old Ghost's men frowned and said, "Uncle Ghost, there's still no chance." Old Ghost gritted his teeth and said, "Keep waiting." Another man said in a low voice, "Today is the last day. What if we still can't find a chance?" Old Ghost said calmly, "Then let's go to Shenzhen again." Hearing Old Ghost's words, the others didn't say anything more. At this moment, the ancestral grave of the Lin family was already full of cars, and there were more than 100 people outside. They were all here to see old Madam Lin off. The Lin family had already arranged a lot of people to guard the surroundings. After getting out of the car, the people of the Lin family carried the old lady's coffin to the grave where old Madam Lin and old Master Lin were buried together. The grave had been dug up and was waiting to be buried. The direct and collateral relatives of the Lin family cried again, and the air was full of sadness. When the old lady's coffin arrived at the grave, it had already been taken over by the people here. The person in charge of the funeral began to bury the old lady according to the customs. The whole process was carried out in an orderly manner. Qin Sheng was already standing next to Lin Yu, holding her shoulder and comforting this little girl. In fact, what Qin Sheng was most afraid of was that old Madame Lin's funeral would be too noisy. It was very likely that Lin Su would get the news from other friends, and then there would be trouble. However, this was also a matter of time. Qin Sheng had no choice but to hide it as long as he could. Before long, the old lady was buried. Next, it was time for the guests to pay their respects. These guests who came to see old Madame Lin off were all dressed in solemn black clothes, holding chrysanthemums in their hands. These chrysanthemums were also prepared in advance by the Lin family. The direct and collateral relatives of the Lin family all stood on both sides. After these guests finished paying their respects, it was the family members' turn to pay their respects. At that time, there would be other procedures. The guests lined up to pay their respects. After paying their respects, they directly got into the car and left the ancestral grave of the Lin family. Their task this time was completely over. Qin Sheng also saw several old acquaintances, such as Wei Li, the Duga siblings, the old monk's grandson, Chu Huanqi, who had already returned to Hangzhou, Boss Hu's son, Brother Luo, Wu Yongchuan, and so on. After paying their respects to old Madame Lin, these old acquaintances who knew Qin Sheng said goodbye to him one after another and then drove away. The weather was getting worse and worse. The Lin family was a little worried that it would rain, so they paid their respects faster. Soon, the guests finished paying their respects. After that, only the direct descendants of the Lin family were left. Qin Sheng paid his respects alone. He burned 3 sticks of incense for old Madame Lin and poured 3 glasses of wine for her. After that, he put the bunch of yellow chrysanthemums on the grave and said in a low voice, "Grandma, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Sue didn't come to see you off. I hope you don't blame her. Thank you. It's all my fault. Grandma, don't worry. I won't let you down. I won't let her down in this life. I'll make her happy later. You can go in peace." After saying that, Qin Sheng kowtowed 3 times and stood up. However, Qin Sheng was not in a hurry to leave. He kept watching the other members of the Lin family paying their respects. When Lin Yu came back, she had already passed out from crying. No matter how hard Qin Sheng tried, he could not pull her up. He could only directly hold her in his arms and walk to the side. He tried his best to calm her down. Half an hour later, the funeral finally came to an end. At this time, the cloudy sky finally began to rain. At the beginning, it was only a light drizzle, but then it became a downpour. All the members of the Lin family could not help sighing with emotion. This was the result of the old lady's good deeds throughout her life. God waited until the funeral was over before it started to rain. Otherwise, the funeral would have been torturous. The rest of the members of the Lin family echoed one after another. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. The rest of the members of the Lin family directly got in their cars and prepared to go home. Qin Sheng had planned to visit Lin Su's mother after the funeral because he would go back to Shenzhen in the afternoon. In the future, he would have little time to come to Ningbo. Moreover, Xue Qingyan had said that Lin Su missed her mother. Therefore, although it was raining heavily, Qin Sheng still went to visit Lin Su's mother according to his original plan. Moreover, it would not take up too much time. At this time, Lin Yu said, "Brother-in-law, let me go with you." Qin Sheng touched Lin Yu's hair and said gently, "No need. You'd better go back and have a good rest. Second uncle has already arranged for someone to take me there. You don't need to worry about me. Don't get wet in the rain and catch a cold." Lin Yu had been a little tired these days. After some persuasion, Lin Yu did not insist on going. At this time, Lin Changhe said, "The rain is a little heavy. Be careful and come back early." Qin Sheng came to the Lin family with bodyguards, so Lin Changhe did not need to worry about anything. Qin Sheng nodded and said, "Okay, I know." After saying this, Qin Sheng parted ways with the members of the Lin family. He got into an off-road vehicle prepared by the Lin family and followed the man arranged by Lin Changhe to go to Lin Su's mother's grave with 2 bodyguards. The route happened to be the opposite of the route that the members of the Lin family took. This scene was seen by Old Ghost, who was hiding not far away. When he saw Qin Sheng going in the opposite direction, Old Ghost finally showed a bloodthirsty smile and said, "Here comes our chance." Chapter 1080. Was he going to die here? Qin Sheng didn't know that danger was coming, and he had planned for it for a long time. Most importantly, there was no one around Qin Sheng this time, especially Chang Baji, who was not by his side. It seemed that Qin Sheng was in danger this time. This area was full of mountains. Although the ancestral grave of the Lin family was not far from the cemetery where Lin Su's mother was buried, the driver didn't drive fast because of the heavy rain. Safety was the priority. People always felt sad when it rained. The two relatives who loved Lin Su the most had passed away. Needless to say, Lin Su's mother had passed away when Lin Su was very young. She had something to do with Lin Chongting, so Lin Su didn't have a good impression of her father all these years. Later on, Lin Su only got close to her grandmother. In fact, Lin Su's life was similar to Qin Sheng's. Qin Sheng's mother also passed away when he was young. Later on, he lived with his grandfather and only got close to him. The only difference was that Lin Su had been living in the Lin family, while Qin Sheng had left the Qin family. Of course, God also compensated Qin Sheng by giving him another Lin family, namely Uncle Lin and Wang Li, which could be considered as making up for the lack of kinship. Of course, there's also a difference. If Qin Sheng stayed in the Qin family, he would definitely be doted on. Not to mention his grandparents, who had loved him since he was young. Qin Chang'an wouldn't treat him badly even if he stayed in the Qin family. Moreover, there was his sister who had waited for him for 20 years. In the words of young people nowadays, they were like the devil who supported his younger brother. In the Lin family, only Lin Su's grandmother doted on her. Therefore, when old Madame Lin passed away, they tried their best to hide it, which was obviously unfair to Lin Su. Qin Sheng remembered that he had never been so sad when his grandfather passed away. It was as if a piece of flesh had been dug out from his body. However, Qin Sheng insisted on not crying. He stayed by his grandfather's coffin for 3 days and 3 nights until the day of his grandfather's burial. After everyone had left, he was like a child who had not grown up, wailing his heart out. His grandfather's death made Qin Sheng feel like a loner. That was when he started traveling for more than 2 years. Today, after seeing old Madame Lin off, Qin Sheng unconsciously thought of the things he had with his grandfather. How time flew. Many years had passed in the blink of an eye. He didn't know if his grandfather would be happy to return to the Qin family. Perhaps, when his grandfather took him away from the Qin family, he just wanted him to live an ordinary life. Who knew that he was born to be adventurous, and after many twists and turns, he finally returned to the Qin family. Now, he was involved in the Qin family's turmoil. That year, his grandfather had taken him away from the Qin Sheng, and finally, he came back to the Qin family. Now, old Madame Lin Sheng. Half an hour later, they arrived at the entrance of the cemetery with good scenery. It was raining heavily today. Except for the staff of the cemetery, there were not many people who came to pay their respects. The rain was really heavy. Editor, translated Li Shi editor. Translated Qin Lin editor. The Li it didn't take him long to find it. The location of the cemetery was relatively good. Although Lin Su's mother couldn't be buried in the Lin family's ancestral grave, the Lin family wouldn't be so stingy. Moreover, old Madame Lin was there, but she couldn't change some family rules. After arriving at the cemetery, Qin Sheng held the umbrella and squatted down slowly. The others stood a few meters away. He looked at Lin Su's mother's tombstone. From the photo on it, one could tell how beautiful Lin Su's mother was back then. Qin Sheng had seen her mother's photo in Lin Su's photo album before. She was really beautiful. Otherwise, how could Lin Chongding be obsessed with her? Otherwise, how could she give birth to such a beauty? It was a pity that beauty had short life. Lin Su's mother's name was Lu Jianxi. It was a very poetic name, taken from the Book of Songs. Simple and simple. Only then will there be a myriad of dances. The sun was in the center, in the front. This was the name given by Lin Su's grandfather. Her grandfather used to be a teacher. His ancestors were scholars. But he died very early, leaving her grandmother and her mother to depend on each other. The second year after Lin Su's mother passed away, Lin Su's grandmother also passed away. This was because the death of Lin Su's mother was a huge blow to the old lady. After all, no one could bear the loss of a husband and daughter. Moreover, The Lin family took Lin Su away. The old lady spent her days in tears, and in the end, she died of exhaustion. Therefore, Lin Su really had no feelings for the Lin family, which was still the case. She only treated old Madam Lin and Lin Yu better. She didn't even care about Lin Changhe in the early years. Maybe because of this, old Madam Lin loved this poor granddaughter so much. Otherwise, Lin Su might be more antisocial today. Qin Sheng slowly put the flowers in front of the tombstone, and then put several tributes in place. Then he lit the paper money and covered it with an umbrella to prevent it from being wet by the rain. He said to himself, "Auntie, I came to see you on behalf of Lin Su. I feel a little guilty facing you. I don't know what identity I should use to see you. If it weren't for me, Lin Su would definitely come to see you often. So please don't blame Lin Su. If you want to blame someone, blame me." The old lady passed away. Lin Su is still in the United States. We didn't tell Lin Su that the old lady passed away. It was a little cruel to Lin Su. I think you must be very angry. I hope you can forgive me. I'm sorry to you, the old lady, and Lin Su. Although I did it for Lin Su, maybe it was also for the child, so I was a little selfish. I also know that I don't have the face to see you. After all, I owe Lin Su too much. She had a hard life in the first half of her life. I thought that I could make up for what she had lost in these years after meeting me. I didn't expect that I was the one who brought her the most pain. So I'm really guilty and don't have the face to see you. Annie, don't worry. I'm not trying to avoid anything. I'll face what I have to face. Like I said to the old lady, I can't do many things, but these are not reasons. I'll pay back what I owe Lin Su in this life. If I can't pay it back in this life, I'll do it in the next life. Just look at me in heaven. I'll also use the rest of my life to protect Lin Su and the child. I won't let them suffer any grievances, let alone let anyone bully them. This is the responsibility and obligation that I have to bear as a man. Annie, Lin Su may not be able to come back to see you in a short time. After the child is born, I believe she will bring the child to see you. At that time, you will definitely be very happy. As for other things, I hope you won't blame Lin Su. Auntie, I may not have the chance to see you in a short time, but if I come to Ningbo again, I'll definitely come to see you. Auntie, thank you. Without you, I wouldn't have met Lin Su. Although you might not have wanted Lin Su to meet me, fate is not something that anyone can control. If fate could be controlled, I hope that after I met Lin Su, the things that happened later would not have happened. Then, these things would not have happened today. Auntie, I won't say any more. I won't disturb you anymore. I'm leaving now. I'll come to see you next time. After saying these words, Qin Sheng stood up. He came to see Lin Su's mother this time, not only to see her mother on behalf of Lin Su, but also to apologize. After all, it was he who changed Lin Su's fate and made her suffer so much. If Lin Su's mother knew about it, how could she not feel sad? However, he had no choice now. He could only pay back what he owed Lin Su in the future. After leaving the cemetery, Qin Sheng was ready to get in the car and go back to the Lin family. After a short rest and saying goodbye to the Lin family, he would directly go to the airport and go back to Shenzhen. The situation in Shenzhen had reached a white-hot point. Although He Yong was a little arrogant with the support of Uncle Long Laolu, as long as the Qin family stabilized the external pressure and slowly checked the accounts from the inside, it was only a matter of time to bring He Yong down. After all, in the face of some ironclad evidence, He Yong could not escape the punishment of the law. As for the things that He Yong knew, the Qin family did not have to worry about them. After all, Qin Chang'an was already involved in it. Compared with the things that Qin Chang'an was really involved in, what He Yong knew was just a trifle which did not have any weight at all. However, no matter what, Qin Sheng still had to solve the problem in Shenzhen as soon as possible so that he could go back to Beijing as soon as possible. The man sent by the Lin family drove. One of Qin Sheng's two bodyguards sat in the front passenger seat, and the other sat beside Qin Sheng. They did not think that there would be any accidents on this trip. After all, this was not Shenzhen, so they were somewhat relaxed. Qin Sheng was more or less tired. In addition, it was the most annoying rainy day, so he was ready to close his eyes and rest for a while. After leaving the cemetery, they would pass by a fork in the road. When their SUV passed by, the road was blocked by a roadblock. However, Qin Sheng and his bodyguards did not know that. In this way, they continued to drive forward. 2 minutes later, the man from the Lin family who was driving suddenly slowed down, and the bodyguard of the Qin family in the front passenger seat instantly became vigilant. Qin Sheng opened his eyes subconsciously and asked, "What's going on?" The bodyguard of the Qin family immediately replied, "Young master, something is wrong. A car is blocking our way." At this time, the two bodyguards were already on guard as if they were facing a formidable enemy. There was definitely something wrong with this kind of thing happening in the wilderness. There must be something wrong when something abnormal happened. Qin Sheng also came to his senses and realized that there was danger. Although he did not know who the other party was, it could be those old enemies in Zhejiang, Hyang's people who came from far away, and it was more likely that they were Uncle Long Laoyo's people. However, Qin Sheng knew that this was definitely not the place to make a move. This time, he had no one to rely on except him and the two bodyguards of the Qin family. Since the other party could appear here, it was obvious that they had come prepared. Therefore, there was only one way, which was to leave. Qin Sheng made a prompt decision and said, "Go back." However, it was too late. This was because another car appeared behind them, directly cutting off their path of retreat. The two cars were only 5 meters away from Qin Sheng's SUV. On the left side of Qin Sheng's SUV was a mountain with dense trees, which could not be driven in at all. On the right side, it was almost like a cliff. If they drove down, it would be no different from suicide. Therefore, Qin Sheng had no way back. At this time, 4 men of unknown ages got out of the two cars, because they were all wearing raincoats, and lowered their heads. However, anyone could see that they were holding very long homemade knives in their hands. They attacked from the front and back, and slowly walked toward Qin Sheng's car. The man from the Lin family was so scared that his face turned blue, and the two bodyguards of the Qin family were also extremely nervous, because it was very likely that they would die here today. What should Qin Sheng do? Was he really going to die here today? Chapter 1081. A Man Boastful? The rain was getting heavier and heavier. The rain blurred his vision, and the surrounding environment became more and more unclear. The man sent by the Lin family was trembling with fear, but he was clear that these people were definitely not coming for him, but for the son-in-law of the Lin family. Only the son-in-law of the Lin family could be so valuable. But he didn't know who these people were. It was said that the son-in-law of the Lin family had a very powerful background. Who dared to kill him? Wouldn't it be like poking a hole in the sky? Looking at the 4 people coming from the front and the back, Qin Sheng narrowed his eyes and was lost in thought. He also wondered who sent these people. But it was not important now. What mattered was how to get out of here. The timing of these people was too coincidental. Obviously, they had planned it carefully. It was estimated that since he entered Ningbo, all his whereabouts had been under their surveillance. Otherwise, why did they choose this time to take action? Should he drive over? Obviously, it was impossible in such a heavy rain. Moreover, he would be attacked from the front and the back. At that time, he would have no chance to escape. Therefore, there was only one way left. That was to fight to the death. Moreover, he also wanted to know the background of these people. After Qin Sheng came to himself, he said bluntly, "Get out of the car and fight the enemies." The two bodyguards of the Qin family were a little worried. "Young master, isn't it a little risky?" "Young master, you stay in the car. We will go down to solve the problem," another bodyguard of the Qin family said in a deep voice. Since they were chosen by Chang Baji to protect Qin Sheng in Ningbo, they were obviously the top bodyguards of the Qin family. Naturally, they had the confidence to say such words. Even a lion would use all its strength to fight a rabbit. Otherwise, it would be besieged and attacked. Qin Sheng didn't want to make such a mistake. After all, he was not a useless playboy who could not even trust a chicken. His current strength was almost on par with Chang Baji's. Lao Cheng's improvement was obvious to all, because he knew that only when one's own strength was powerful could they resolve any danger at critical times. Therefore, facing the current crisis, Qin Sheng naturally had to solve it by himself. Otherwise, if something happened to the two bodyguards, he would be in a more difficult situation. As for the man sent by the Lin family, Qin Sheng had no time to care about him in the moment, let alone pin his hopes on him. Qin Sheng said directly, "You just stay in the car and call the Lin family for help. If anything happens to us, you can find a way to escape. We definitely can't protect you." "I got it, young master. I'll make the call right away," the man from the Lin family said in a trembling voice. After saying this, Qin Sheng got out of the car directly with the two bodyguards of the Qin family. Qin Sheng and his bodyguards did not open an umbrella. Naturally, they could not care about this at this time. 3 versus 4. If their strengths were well matched, there should be no problem. Moreover, Qin Sheng's power was already close to Changbaji's. There were 2 people in front and behind them. At this time, they were only 2 meters away from Qin Sheng and the others. Qin Sheng could almost see their faces, but they were wearing raincoats and had their heads lowered. "Who are you?" Qin Sheng's clothes were soaked in the rain in an instant. He casually wiped his face and asked with a frown. At this time, the man in the raincoat in front slowly raised his head. At the same time, he took off his raincoat and said, "Young Master Qin, how have you been?" When he saw the man's appearance, Qin Sheng instantly felt like a basin of cold water was poured on him, because he had already remembered who this man was. After all, Qin Sheng's memory was superb. This middle-aged man was the man who intercepted him and Changbaji alone at the entrance of the Yang family. At that time, this man even fought with Changbaji for a few moves. In the end, no one knew why he left directly. Maybe he just wanted to warn them. However, Changbaji's final evaluation was that this man's strength was definitely not his. So when he saw this man, Qin Sheng's mood was very complicated. He did not expect to meet such a tough guy. It seemed that today would be a fierce battle. "It's you," Qin Sheng replied coldly. This man was naturally Old Ghost. Old Ghost chuckled and said, "I didn't expect young Master Qin to still remember me. I'm so honored. Then I'll try my best to leave your corpse intact today." "You're talking big," Qin Sheng retorted. Even if he lost the final result, he would not lose his momentum. When Old Ghost heard this, he laughed out loud and said, "Young Master Qin, without Changbaji, I really don't know how you could turn the situation around. Otherwise, we would not have followed you for so long. From Shenzhen to Ningbo, we waited in Ningbo for a few days. It was not easy to wait for such a rare opportunity. Do you think we would miss it?" When he recognized Old Ghost, Qin Sheng knew that this time Elder Long wanted to kill him. It seemed that only Elder Long had the courage to do so. These enemies in the Yangtze River Delta were already in the past. These days, Qin Sheng did not find any flaws. From Shenzhen to Ningbo, Elder Long was really patient. Could it be that the changes in Beijing were so big that Elder Long was involved, so Elder Long made such a big move? In this case, did Sixth Uncle and the others know about this behind the scenes? Elder Long really wants to kill me? If he kills me, isn't he afraid of the revenge of the Qin family and the Zhu family? Qin Sheng squinted and said. Now he had already felt the crisis. If it was premeditated for a long time, then the strength of this group of people was definitely not simple. After all, they were sent by Elder Long. Only this old guy, who was over 50 years old, was already very threatening. If the strength of the others was not simple, then he might really die here today. Therefore, Qin Sheng was thinking of a way to get out of this situation. Old Ghost revealed a bloodthirsty smile and stared at Qin Sheng as he said, "It has nothing to do with me. I'm just following orders. Killing you is my task." Qin Sheng sneered and said, "Are you sure you can kill me? Aren't you afraid that I have a backup plan?" Young Master Qin, at this time, is it interesting to play such a child's game? We have been following you for so long. How can we not know what is going on around you? Don't delay any more time. Don't wait for your reinforcements. Let me send you to hell as soon as possible." Old Ghost said firmly. He did not want to waste his breath anymore. The sooner it ended, the sooner he could go back and report. Qin Sheng looked at the environment in front of him and did not know when they had been surrounded. Old Ghost said straightforwardly, "Do it." Qin Sheng had no time to explain other things. He could only say, "Leave him to me. You deal with the others." By the time Qin Sheng finished his words, Old Ghost had already rushed to Qin Sheng. The self-made long saber in his hand directly slashed at Qin Sheng, while the others had already gone to deal with the two bodyguards of the Qin family. A big battle directly began. Old Ghost did not want to play any game of cat and mouse. His task this time was very simple. That was to kill Qin Sheng. If he let Qin Sheng escape, then he could only directly commit suicide to apologize to Elder Long. In the heavy rain, Old Ghost's footsteps were very fast, as if at this moment even the raindrops had stopped. The long knife in his hand went straight to Qin Sheng's face. When they were about to fight, the long knife suddenly slashed across. Qin Sheng did not advance, but retreated. He did not have a chance to retreat, so he braced himself because he knew that if he was a little careless, he would die here today. When a long saber slashed horizontally toward his chest, Qin Sheng took the opportunity to bend over and dodge it. He watched the long saber pass through his chest, and at this time he also punched Old Ghost's abdomen in a timely manner. Old Ghost did not care. When Qin Sheng dodged the long knife, he had already put it back. He took advantage of the situation and twisted his wrist. The long knife had already flown out of his hand to the other side, but the trajectory of the long knife was the back of Qin Sheng's head. This move could be said to be fierce. When the long knife left his hand, Old Ghost jumped high at the same time and used his knee to block Qin Sheng's arm, making it difficult for Qin Sheng to move. At this time, Qin Sheng subconsciously felt the crisis coming from behind, which was an intuition honed by many years of life and death. He was shocked and quickly leaned over to avoid the long knife passing through the back of his head. However, there was a flaw in front of him. Old Ghost used the knife to kick Qin Sheng's shoulder at the same time. Qin Sheng had no chance to dodge and was directly kicked back a few steps. On the other side, the two bodyguards of the Qin family were already struggling to deal with the three masters on Elder Long's side. There was a big gap between the strength of the two sides. Obviously, the bodyguards of the Qin family were no match for them. In just dozens of seconds, the bodyguards of the Qin family had been injured. When Qin Sheng retreated, he did not panic. Instead, he took the opportunity to join the chaotic battle behind him. He punched the armpit of a man on Elder Long's side, and then took the opportunity to grab a long knife. In this way, he would not be in a disadvantageous position when fighting with Old Ghost. Old Ghost seemed to see through Qin Sheng's mind. After taking advantage of Qin Sheng, he did not stop. Holding the long knife in his hand, he pressed forward again and joined the chaotic battle. The crowd in the rain was in a mess in an instant. At this time, the man of the Lin family had already called Lin Changhe and reported the situation here. When Lin Changhe heard the news, he was so shocked that he broke into a cold sweat. He did not expect that Qin Sheng would be attacked in Ningbo, and that these people would choose this time to attack him. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, the Lin family would not be able to get away with it. Lin Changhe did not care about anything else. He immediately gathered the bodyguards of the Lin family and the security team he hired this time. All of them got in the car and rushed to the place where Qin Sheng was attacked. However, he was afraid that they would not make it in time in the World Trade CBD of Beijing. After the meeting today, Qin Ran felt a little uneasy. At this time, her right eye kept twitching. Her left eye twitched for wealth, and her right eye twitched for disaster. Did something bad happen? Apart from the old man in prison, it seemed that Qin Sheng, who was far away, was the only one she was most worried about. Thinking that Qin Sheng was still in the city, Qin Ran felt a little worried and called Qin Sheng immediately. However, Qin Ran called him twice in a row, but he did not answer. This time, Qin Ran was completely panicked. Did something bad happen to Qin Sheng? At this time, Qin Ran could only call Changbaji. Chapter 1082. What should he do? Before going to Ningbo, Qin Sheng had told his sister that old Madame Lin had passed away. Lin Su couldn't go back to China, so he had to go to Ningbo. Even if Lin Su was in China, old Madame Lin had been so nice to him, so he had to send her off. In this regard, Qin Ran did not say much. She felt that this was what she should do. She even took the initiative to ask Qin Sheng if he needed to inform Ruyu, lest she would be angry when she found out. Qin Sheng even smiled and said that there was no need. Ryu was not such a petty woman. However, Qin Ran didn't know that Qin Sheng didn't take Chong Baji and the others with him, but only 2 bodyguards of the Qin family. If Qin Ran had known that, she would never have let Qin Sheng go to Ningbo at this time. Qin Ran knew that Qin Sheng would take Chong Baji with him wherever he went. Given Chong Baji's strength, Qin Ran could rest assured. However, Qin Sheng did not take Chong Baji with him this time. Instead, he went to Ningbo rashly. Of course, Qin Sheng did that to make sure that nothing would go wrong in Shenzhen. Moreover, he would be back in Ningbo soon after staying there for 2 days. However, he had been targeted by Elder Long. Elder Long wanted to kill Qin Sheng because of what had happened in Beijing. Elder Long wanted to end the Qin family's bloodline and make them repeat the same mistake. When Qin Ran called Chong Baji, she comforted herself that Qin Sheng might be busy. After all, old Madame Lin's business was more important, so he didn't have time to answer the phone. Soon, Chong Baji answered the phone. Qin Ran couldn't wait to ask, "Uncle Chong, what is Qin Sheng doing?" Chong Baji was stunned for a few seconds, but then he understood. It seemed that Qin Ran didn't know that Qin Sheng didn't let him go to Ningbo. He didn't think much about it and replied directly, "Qin Sheng went to Ningbo. Don't you know?" "I know," Qin Ran replied subconsciously, but then she was surprised. "You didn't go with him?" "No, he didn't let me go," Chong Baji replied honestly. Qin Ran was completely panicked and said in shock, "If he didn't let you go with him, who went to Ningbo with him? I can't get in touch with him now." Upon hearing Chong Baji's words, Chong Baji was also somewhat surprised. He immediately replied, "Qin Sheng chose 2 bodyguards to go to Ningbo. I'll call them right now. Don't worry. There should be no accidents in Ningbo." After hanging up the phone, Chong Baji immediately called Ningbo. In the office, after knowing that Chong Baji didn't accompany Qin Sheng to Ningbo, she became more anxious. She called Qin Sheng several times in succession, but nobody answered. Qin Ran was restless and paced back and forth in the office. At this time, Zhao Anji came in. When she saw Qin Ran like this, she frowned and said, Ran, what happened to you?" Qin Ran explained directly, "Auntie, I can't get in touch with Qin Sheng. I just called Uncle Chong and found out that he didn't go to Ningbo with Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng went to Ningbo with only 2 bodyguards. Could something have happened to him?" Zhao Anji was also a little abnormal today. She couldn't fall asleep last night, so her mental state today was relatively poor. She was even more distracted during the meeting. This wasn't her usual state. "Didn't he go to Ningbo? He should be fine. Don't worry about him." Zhao Anji comforted Qin Ran. Qin Ran shook her head and said, "I'm still a little worried. I hope he's fine." Zhao Anji continued, "If you're really worried, you can call the Lin family. Then you'll know about Qin Sheng's news." Except for Lin Su, Qin Ran didn't know anyone else in the Lin family. She didn't know how to contact them, but she should be able to get in touch with Lao Chong. In Shenzhen, Chong Baji called the 2 bodyguards, but couldn't get through, not to mention Qin Sheng's phone. Something must be wrong. Chong Baji also felt somewhat nervous. He needed to contact the Lin family. This was the only way Chong Baji had left. Fortunately, he had Lin Chang's phone number, but he hadn't contacted him yet. Therefore, Chong Baji called Lin Changhe immediately. But what made Chong Baji even more worried was that Lin Chang's phone line had been busy. Putting these things together, Chong Baji had to think more about it. He asked the others to continue to call the bodyguards of the Qin family and Qin Sheng. Meanwhile, he kept calling Lin Changhe. No matter what, he had to contact the people in Ningbo to make sure that Qin Sheng was fine. He hoped that all this was just a false alarm. A few minutes later, Chong Baji finally got through to Lin Changhe. Before Lin Changhe said anything, Chong Baji said, "Second Master Lin, this is Chong Baji. Did Qin Sheng call you?" Originally, Lin Changhe didn't want to answer this strange number, but this number had called him several times. Lin Changhe was worried that it might be Qin Sheng's people, but he didn't expect that it would be Chong Baji. He knew Chong Baji was Qin Sheng's bodyguard, and his strength was beyond doubt. When Qin Sheng came to Ningbo this time, he wondered why Qin Sheng didn't take Chong Baji with him. After all, Chang Baji and Qin Sheng were almost inseparable. Hearing this, Chang Baji was a little relieved. Then he asked, Second Master Lin, I really want to ask you if you're with Qin Sheng. The Qin family is looking for him, and we can't get in touch with him. What? Didn't Qin Sheng call you? Lin Changhe said, in surprise. Chang Baji frowned and said, Second Master Lin, what do you mean? Something happened to Qin Sheng. Lin Changhe didn't dare to waste any more time. He was really anxious to go to the place where Qin Sheng was in trouble. Chang Baji stood up directly and asked, Second Master Lin, what happened? Lin Changhe hurriedly told Chang Baji about the phone call from the driver of the Lin family. Meanwhile, he told Chang Baji that he was on his way there with a group of people, and he had already informed the Public Security Bureau, which had started to take action. When Chang Baji heard this news, he couldn't stay calm even though he had experienced all kinds of storms, because he knew something really happened. Chang Baji didn't talk nonsense with Lin Changhe anymore. No matter what happened there, he had to go to Ningbo as soon as possible. After hanging up the phone, Chang Baji called Hao Lei, He Wei, and Fu Rong immediately. After the phone was connected, he said only one sentence. Something happened to Qin Sheng. Go to the airport and go to Ningbo as soon as possible. When Hao Lei, He Wei, and Fu Rong heard this news, they all panicked. They put down everything they were doing and drove to the airport immediately without asking anything. At this time, Chang Baji also went downstairs with 2 bodyguards and went to the airport immediately. Meanwhile, he kept calling Qin Sheng and the bodyguards of the Qin family. However, he still couldn't get through to them. The longer he waited, the more anxious Chang Baji became, because the probability of Qin Sheng being in trouble was higher. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, he couldn't imagine what the consequences would be. As for who did this to Qin Sheng, Chang Baji didn't care about it at all. He could only find out when he arrived in Ningbo. Now, Chang Baji was not by Qin Sheng's side, and there were only 2 bodyguards of the Qin family by Qin Sheng's side. He could only hope that Qin Sheng would be safe and sound. Chang Baji had been so busy that he had forgotten to call Qin Ran back. In the office in Beijing, Qin Ran couldn't wait anymore. She took the initiative to call Chang Baji again. She sounded very worried. Uncle Chang, what on earth happened? Did you get in touch with the Lin family? Why didn't Qin Sheng answer the phone? What on earth happened? At this time, Chang Baji remembered that he forgot to call Qin Ran back. However, how could he tell Qin Ran about the situation in Ningbo? Chang Baji subconsciously thought for a few seconds. In the end, he decided not to alarm Qin Ran. After all, even if he told Qin Ran that Qin Sheng was in danger in Ningbo, Qin Ran was too far away to help. He could wait until the Lin family confirmed the news. Maybe it wouldn't take long for Qin Sheng to solve the problem. Otherwise, if Qin Ran was in a mess, she would definitely make a big fuss. At that time, too many people would be alarmed. Consequently, Chang Baji had to calm Qin Ran down and said, I just called the Lin family. Qin Sheng has something to deal with now. He will call you back after he finishes his work. After hearing Chang Baji's words, Qin Ran finally felt relieved. She let out a long sigh of relief and said, Good. You scared me. I will wait for his call. After Qin Ran hung up the phone, Chang Baji instantly felt somewhat uneasy. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, how could he explain it to Qin Ran? That was the truth. When Qin Ran felt relieved, Qin Sheng was already in a desperate fight. After a chaotic fight, the 2 bodyguards of the Qin family were almost disabled and seriously injured. The situation on Qin Sheng's side was not optimistic. In contrast, Lao Gui was unscathed. As for the other 3 helpers of Lao Gui, except for one who was lying on the ground because of Qin Sheng's sneak attack, the other 2 were only slightly injured. What should Qin Sheng do? Chapter 1083. At this moment, Qin Sheng was extremely embarrassed. He hadn't been like this for a long time. The last time was when he escaped from Hangzhou and was chased to Huangmei County. Qin Sheng held the long knife that he had snatched from Old Ghost in his hand. The blood on it had already been washed away by the rain, but there was still a lot of blood on Qin Sheng's body. The blood had soaked through his clothes and dyed his white shirt red. Qin Sheng was half kneeling on the ground. His black suit jacket had been taken off, and his white shirt was already in tatters. There were several shocking knife wounds on his body, which were bleeding. However, they were not fatal wounds. The two bodyguards of the Qin family were still struggling because they had no choice. They could only try their best to survive. Otherwise, not to mention protecting Qin Sheng, even they would have to stay here today. No one would be able to walk out alive. As for Old Ghost, he held a long saber in his hand and stared at Qin Sheng, who was struggling on his deathbed, with a smile. Although they had already sacrificed one of their companions, it was not a big deal because their strength could absolutely crush Qin Sheng's side. The final result was already determined. This time, no one could save Qin Sheng. I said, "If you surrender, I will give you a whole body." "Why do you have to do this?" Old Ghost wiped the rain on his face and said arrogantly. Qin Sheng slowly got up, held the long saber in his hand across his chest, and said, "Do you think I will? Alas, why are you always so stubborn? If you can't change the result, just accept it. Isn't that good?" Old Ghost walked forward unhurriedly and said. Qin Sheng sneered and said, "Don't talk so much nonsense when you are killing people. Otherwise, when the other side's reinforcements arrive, will you be the one to die?" Old Ghost didn't expect Qin Sheng to be so stubborn. He had to say, "Don't worry. If I can't even take these factors into account, how could I choose to kill you here? But thank you for your reminder. Let me send you on your way." After that, Old Ghost signaled his two companions to attack at the same time. On the outskirts of the mountain, far away from the urban area of Ningbo, because of this untimely heavy rain, it was almost deserted. Moreover, the intersection of the road had been blocked. Qin Sheng's situation was really worrying. He didn't know if they could get out of here. Qin Sheng felt somewhat helpless. Maybe he owed Lin Su too much. That was why he had such an encounter in Ningbo. It seemed that he had also gone through hardships in Ningbo last time. Lao Gui's two companions had already taken action. Before Qin Sheng could do anything, the two bodyguards next to him had already risked their lives to fight against him. They would protect Qin Sheng even at the cost of their lives. Anyway, today's results seemed to be like this, and they had no chance to make a comeback. Even if they died, it seemed that as long as Qin Sheng was alive, he could avenge them. "No!" Qin Sheng hurriedly stopped her. Unfortunately, it was too late. The two seriously injured bodyguards were already an arrow at the end of its flight. It was impossible for them to bring any substantial threat to Old Ghost. Seeing that they were still struggling, Old Ghost companions couldn't help but feel pained and rushed over. The fight between the two had ended before it even started. Old Ghost's two companions effortlessly dealt with the two bodyguards of the Qin family. The long knives in their hands stabbed into the bodies of the Qin family's bodyguards. The Qin family's bodyguards completely fell down and no longer had the chance to stand up. Qin Sheng didn't have time to stop them, and they died just like that. This scene ignited all of Qin Sheng's anger. Qin Sheng knew that he had fallen into a desperate situation. This was already the most dangerous time in his life. He had to fight to the death to have a chance to survive. In the past, he had a lot of helpers. If he couldn't beat them, he could still escape. Where there's life, there's hope. But this time, Qin Sheng didn't even have the chance to escape, because he didn't have the strength to escape at all, because the opponent's strength was too strong. However, Qin Sheng would never admit defeat like this. He would never admit defeat. Only by fighting for his life could he win. If he didn't fight, he would only die. As for the man sent by the Lin family, when Qin Sheng and the others were fighting, the man wanted to take the opportunity to escape. He didn't need to risk his life for Qin Sheng, these people who had nothing to do with him. Moreover, he was just an ordinary driver of the Lin family, and he only wanted to support his family. How could he experience such a thing? Naturally, he didn't want to die like this. After all, he had a wife and children. Unfortunately, how could Old Ghost allow anyone to leave alive? When he was about to run, he had already been dealt with a knife. This man from the Lin family fell on the side of the road, just like this. It could be said that he died with a grievance. The current situation was that on Old Ghost's side, in addition to Old Ghost, who was only slightly injured, there were still two companions who still maintained their combat power, while Qin Sheng was the only one left on his side. The ending seemed to be doomed. Qin Sheng, now you're the only one left. Are you still not convinced? Old Ghost said happily. This time, he didn't fail his mission. Finally, he could successfully complete the task given by Elder Long. Qin Sheng picked up the long knife in his hand and said, "If you want to kill me, then you have to have the ability to take it." After that, Qin Sheng no longer talked nonsense. He suddenly got up and rushed toward Old Ghost with unprecedented strength. The man in front of him directly blocked Qin Sheng's way. The two sides immediately fought. The long saber in Qin Sheng's hand suddenly slashed down, forcing the man to take 2 steps back. It was only by relying on his strong arm strength that he pushed Qin Sheng out. However, Qin Sheng immediately hooked a raindrop with his foot and went straight to the opposite side. The man dodged subconsciously, but the long knife in Qin Sheng's hand had already slashed toward his chest. It seemed that the man was about to be injured. Fortunately, another man next to him had already made a move. He directly blocked his companion's chest with his long knife, making it difficult for Qin Sheng to get close. At the same time, the man kicked Qin Sheng's waist, forcing Qin Sheng to step back. However, Qin Sheng did not retreat. He took the man's kick. At the same time, it seemed that he continued to attack the first man, but the long knife in his hand suddenly slashed along the tip of the second man's knife. The man did not react at first, but when he did, it was already too late. Qin Sheng's knife directly slashed across the man's face, leaving a shocking wound. Blood gushed out in an instant. Unfortunately, it only stayed for a few seconds before it was directly washed away by the rain. The man's heart-wrenching cry resounded through the whole mountain. Qin Sheng's action was equivalent to exposing himself. When he succeeded in the surprise attack, the first man had already come to his senses. The long knife in his hand looked along Qin Sheng's shoulder. Fortunately, Qin Sheng had a countermeasure. He completely gave up on the first man and continued to go straight to the second man. After all, this man was the weakest at this time. If this knife just now had slashed the man's eyes, it could not have been better. Then he would have directly solved the problem, but it was a pity. Qin Sheng found the right opportunity and instantly burst out. He grabbed the man's arm, which was slashing at him randomly, and directly stabbed the man's abdomen with a knife. Before the man came to his senses, Qin Sheng had completely solved the problem. The price Qin Sheng paid for doing so was that the first man used a long saber to cut a bloody wound on his back, which almost tore Qin Sheng's entire shirt apart. The wound was more than 10 centimeters long, and the flesh inside could be seen clearly. Qin Sheng was in so much pain that he gritted his teeth. "You're right." However, Qin Sheng did not flinch. He knew that he could not leave his back to that man again. Otherwise, he would lose his life here. He pulled the second man and turned around abruptly. As expected, the first man's long saber attacked again. However, this time, his saber slashed on his companion's shoulder. Qin Sheng also took the opportunity to kick his abdomen, which repelled the man. At this time, Qin Sheng pulled out the long knife, endured the pain of several knife wounds on his body, and wanted to take down the first man in one go. Perhaps he had already become numb to the pain, or perhaps Qin Sheng's willpower was particularly strong. After all, he had experienced all kinds of desperate situations and suffered all kinds of injuries. The last time, he lay in bed for a full half a year, and Lin Su took care of him for half a year, which allowed him to recover. This time, no matter how miserable it was nothing more than the first time, because if the Qin family did not intervene that time, he would have died there. At this time, Old Ghost, who had been watching the show, made his move again. It cannot be said that Old Ghost was watching the show. After all, this scene only lasted for a few seconds. Old Ghost did not expect Qin Sheng to suddenly burst out with such great strength this time, which made him a little surprised. Old Ghost kicked Qin Sheng's already injured shoulder very lightly, making Qin Sheng, who still had a chance, fall heavily into the rain, instantly staining the surrounding ground red. When Qin Sheng wanted to stand up, Old Ghost had quietly arrived in front of him, and the long knife in his hand fell down. Qin Sheng hurriedly wanted to resist, but the long knife was slashed far away by Old Ghost's knife. Old Ghost's strength was very overbearing, and Qin Sheng's wrist was a little painful. He finally realized how terrifying Old Ghost's strength was. No wonder Lao Chong said that Old Ghost's strength might not be weaker than his, while Qin Sheng's strength was only close to Lao Chang's. Wanting to kill Old Ghost in such a desperate situation seemed to be a fool's talk. At this time, Qin Sheng had not yet stood up and was completely at a disadvantage. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to get up and continue fighting, but Old Ghost did not give him a chance. He directly pressed his knee heavily on his chest, which broke several of Qin Sheng's ribs. Qin Sheng coughed violently, followed by 2 mouthfuls of blood. Qin Sheng was really a little miserable like this. That's enough. Do you really think you're so powerful? Old Ghost's words completely sentenced Qin Sheng to death. But would Qin Sheng just admit defeat like this? No, Qin Sheng would never admit defeat unless he died. So Qin Sheng glared at Old Ghost and punched Old Ghost's face without warning. However, Old Ghost did not escape at all and took Qin Sheng's punch. However, in the next second, Old Ghost's eyes burned with rage. He grabbed Qin Sheng's wrist with his left hand, making it impossible for Qin Sheng to resist. At this time, his right hand, which was holding the long saber, fell straight down. Under Qin Sheng's horrified eyes, the long saber was directly inserted into Qin Sheng's shoulder. The long saber penetrated Qin Sheng's shoulder and stabbed into the ground. Qin Sheng was nailed to the ground just like that. He was in so much pain that he roared at the sky. He had completely fallen into madness, and his brain was a little fuzzy. However, Old Ghost grinned and laughed. But at this moment, Old Ghost's laughter was a little scary. I said, "I can leave you a whole body, but unfortunately, you refused," Old Ghost said gloomily. The pain from the wounds all over his body had already destroyed Qin Sheng's willpower. His consciousness was getting more and more blurred, and he seemed to be unable to hear Old Ghost's voice. However, he still wanted to raise his arm and continue fighting. Because he didn't want to die here, he still had a lot of things to do. And he never thought that he would die in Ningbo, die here. Was he really going to die here? No, he couldn't. So Qin Sheng still had to fight. He used all his strength to slowly lift the arm that was nailed to the ground, but this arm only rose a little before it fell heavily to the ground. Old Ghost shook his head and smiled bitterly. Wasn't it a sense of accomplishment to be able to kill such a person with his own hands? After all, this was Master Qin's son. Unfortunately, the final result was like this. Old Ghost let out a long sigh. He didn't want to continue to delay. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to leave smoothly. So Old Ghost slowly pulled out the long knife, and even pulled out Qin Sheng's flesh and blood. Blood flowed along the arm all over the ground. Even if Old Ghost didn't do anything, Qin Sheng would definitely die from excessive blood loss. Old Ghost raised the long knife and sighed. "Young Master Qin, it's time to send you on your way." Was Qin Sheng really going to die here? Chapter 1084. It was a sunny day in Beijing. Elder Long was in a good mood today. He went to the newly built China Zune building, which happened to be a company that had just moved into the building. Elder Long came here to have a look, which surprised the person in charge. He didn't know who Elder Long was, but the person who followed Elder Long was his boss. The office of the person in charge was naturally vacated by Elder Long. He didn't even have the right to stay next to Elder Long, so he went to work in the conference room. There were 2 bodyguards at the door of the office, preventing anyone from entering. Except for Elder Long and the unknown man, there was no one else in the office. The weather is so good today. The sky is so clear. Elder Long stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window with his walking stick and looked at the scenery outside. China Zune building was the tallest building in Beijing, which was 528 meters high. Standing there, one could see the whole city of Beijing. Perhaps it was because of this that Elder Long rarely came out to relax. The owner behind him was the famous CITIC Group. This office happened to face the direction of Chong and Street. From here, one could not only see the whole Chong and Street, but also the Forbidden City in the distance, let alone the Beijing Square. Elder Long had been rooted in this city for his entire life. He had seen the desolate city transform into its current prosperous state. He had also seen all kinds of people on the streets take to the stage to pay their respects. He didn't dare to say how powerful he was, but he believed that he could be considered one of them. Over the years, he had been involved in too many things. He had trained many young people and offended too many big shots and big families. However, he was alone. What was there to be afraid of? Elder Long looked up at the time on the wall and murmured to himself, "It's time to see the result." The man in his 60s immediately came forward and said, "Uncle Long, what did you say?" Elder Long liked this nephew who was not related to him by blood. This was also because his father had helped him a lot in the past. Unfortunately, his character was hesitant and his ability was mediocre. So in the end, he did not choose to be an official. Instead, he chose to be a businessman. After today, our good days will come to an end. Many things will change, Elder Long muttered. The man didn't quite understand. Anyway, he knew that old Master Cheen had been in a bad mood recently because of the Cheen family's matter. However, Sixth Uncle and the others were not capable enough, so old Master Cheen was also involved. He guessed that he was feeling emotional about this matter. At this time, the clear skies of Sijio City were suddenly blown by strong winds without any warning. This was a little strange. It was also in the World Trade Center, but not in the same building. Even though Cheen Ran had answered Changbaji's call, her mood did not ease at all. Her eyelids were still twitching, and her heart was beating faster. Even her breathing was not smooth. Ran, are you all right? If you can't take it, let's go to the hospital. Zhao Anji was worried that there might be something wrong with Cheen Ran's body. She had indeed been tired recently. Cheen Ran was a little confused. She hadn't felt this way for a long time. What was going on today? Grandma was fine, so she called her aunt. Her husband should be fine, too. The only thing she was worried about was her brother. Changbaji had already called her back. "Auntie, maybe I'm too tired. I'll be fine after a short rest." Cheen Ran insisted. There were 2 meetings in the afternoon, and she didn't want to waste time in the hospital. Zhao Anji didn't say anything, so she shook her head helplessly. At the entrance of Nanchang Street, Song Ruyu had just left her teacher's place. It was rare for her teacher to have some time, so Song Ruyu reported her decision to her teacher. This decision would determine her future for the next 5 years, so her teacher hoped that she would be careful. She didn't know whether she was thinking about it, or just a little absent-minded. Song Ryu didn't go far when she was distracted and rear-ended a car with a military license plate at the traffic light. She had never had any accidents in all her years of driving. Most of the time, it was other people who caused accidents. This was the first time in her life. Fortunately, she didn't drive very fast, or it would be a big problem. Before Song Ryu got out of the car, 2 men in military uniforms got out of the Audi with a military license plate in front of her. One should be the driver, and the other should be the secretary. Song Ryu looked at the license plate. It should be the car of a leader of the military commission. After all the people who went in and out of this area were high-level leaders. After the accident, the policeman on duty immediately rushed over. After all, it was a special area, and they couldn't allow anything to happen. Moreover, they had noticed that the Audi was of a high level. Song Ryu also got out of the car slowly. After all, she had rear-ended someone, so she had nothing to say. After getting out of the car, Song Ryu apologized sincerely. "Sorry, I was distracted." The 2 soldiers were very vigilant. Even though they saw a beautiful woman, they still said cautiously, "Please show me your driver's license." Song Ryu didn't say anything more. She handed her driver's license and her work permit to them so that they would be relieved. After all, her identity was special, and they might be nervous. At this time, the leader in the back seat of the Audi suddenly got out of the car. As soon as he got out of the car, he looked at Song Ryu and waved. "Ryu, why are you here?" When Song Ryu saw the old general with 2 gold stars on his shoulders and gray hair, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't expect to see an acquaintance. She walked over quickly and said, "Uncle Han, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm sorry. I was distracted just now, so I rear-ended someone." "Child, it's just a small matter. As long as you're fine, it's okay." The old general in military uniform smiled. Song Ryu smiled embarrassedly. Since they were acquaintances, it would be easy to follow the normal procedures. It was 8 o'clock in the evening in Los Angeles. After dinner, Xue Qingyan accompanied Lin Su to walk on the street outside. This was the rich area of Los Angeles, where elites from Silicon Valley and superstars from Hollywood lived. Therefore, they didn't have to worry about the security at night. The environment in the United States was like this. The more poor people gathered, the less safe it was, and the more rich people gathered, the safer it was. Xue Qingyan had been on edge these days. She tried to find all kinds of things to keep Lin Su busy. She almost didn't allow Lin Su to use her mobile phone. She deliberately said that the radiation of mobile phones was bad for the fetus, and so on. Lin Su, a top student who didn't believe in such crooked ways, was a little worried. In the end, she almost stopped using her mobile phone for the sake of the baby. Walking on the street, Lin Su suddenly stopped and said excitedly, "Sister, I feel it." Although it was safer here, they still brought bodyguards when they went out just in case. Lin Su was so precious now. The baby in her belly was very likely to be the heir of the Qin family in the future. Although the Qin family had lost the aircraft carrier Chong and system, it was still a big tree with deep roots. Xue Qingyan was surprised and said, "Feel what?" "The little guy kicked me." "It kicked me," Lin Su said in surprise. She had cut her long hair and changed it to a short, shoulder-length hair. After all, a beauty was a beauty. No matter what hairstyle it was beautiful. Even Xue Qingyan thought that Lin Su looked more charming with short hair than before. Xue Qingyan was also surprised and said, "Really? Let me hear it." She immediately squatted down and put her face on Lin Su's belly. She really felt the little guy's throbbing. Xue Qingyan said happily, "I feel it too." After getting up, the two women looked at each other and smiled happily. Xue Qingyan asked without any warning, Su, do you like boys or girls?" She had never asked this question before. Xue Qingyan didn't ask, but it didn't mean that Lin Su didn't think about it. She said lightly, "I like girls, and I hope it will be a girl." In this way, she can grow up safely and live happily for the rest of her life. After Lin Su said this, Xue Qingyan roughly understood what Lin Su meant. It was not that Lin Su didn't like boys, but she didn't want to give birth to a boy. Because if it was a boy, he might be like Qin Sheng, carrying all kinds of shackles for the rest of his life. Most of the time, he lived for others and for the family, not for himself. In this way, he would not be happy for the rest of his life. Lin Su didn't want her child to live like this for the rest of his life. Xue Qingyan didn't say much. She just nodded and said, "Then give birth to a girl." In the heavy rain in Ningbo, Qin Sheng's consciousness was getting blurrier and blurrier. Not to mention that several ribs in his chest were broken. The several fatal knife wounds on his body had already made him tired to deal with them. His shoulder no longer belonged to him. Blood continued to flow along the rain to the roadside. He had no strength to resist anymore, and his eyes could hardly see the old ghost. Was he really going to die? It was said that when people died, they would think of their life. It seemed that this was the case last time. He thought of a life without much achievements, which could be said to be a life of mediocrity. What about this time? He didn't think so much. He only thought of regrets. There were really too many regrets in this life. It seemed that he didn't know how to make up for some of them. If he had known that he was going to die like this, he wouldn't have had so many scruples in this life, and he wouldn't have hurt so many people. He lived a brilliant life without regrets. He didn't owe anyone anything, and he didn't care about anyone's eyes. It was just that there were too many regrets. The biggest regret might be that he couldn't see his child. He was an incompetent father. He hoped that the child wouldn't hate him. As for other regrets, Qin Sheng didn't have time to think about them. Now he only hoped that after he died, they wouldn't be sad. Don't be sad, or he would feel guilty. But how could he not be sad? Qin Sheng's consciousness became more and more blurred, and his eyes were about to close. He seemed to see the old ghost's long knife falling. The last sentence in his mind was, "Is he really going to die like this?" However, the old ghost's long knife didn't fall as he wished. When the old ghost's long knife fell, A few silver needles came out of nowhere and instantly drilled in several acupuncture points on his arm that was holding the knife. His whole arm was directly numb, and the long knife in his hand was naturally useless. Who? The old ghost reacted in an instant, hurriedly got up and shouted. He only heard a woman's voice behind him, saying gloomily, "You shouldn't have touched him." The old ghost subconsciously turned around, only to see a beautiful and somewhat shocking woman standing behind him, and his companion had fallen to the ground, vomiting blood. For a second, the old ghost thought that this woman might be a ghost. However, he never believed in these things. "Who are you?" the old ghost asked angrily, and at the same time, he was ready to make a move. He knew that he didn't have more time. He had already killed Qin Sheng. Why did such a strange woman rush out halfway? If he couldn't kill Qin Sheng today, he really didn't know how to explain it to Elder Long later, so he wouldn't miss this opportunity. It was just that the woman in front of him was really a bit strange. It was already terrible that she appeared silently, and she seemed to have the power of charm. As long as he looked at her, he couldn't help but be absent-minded. Maybe she was really too beautiful. So beautiful that it was a little unreal, like a woman in this world. The woman in white slowly walked forward and said in an extremely cold voice, "You don't need to know." When the woman finished this sentence, the old ghost suddenly bled from his 7 orifices and fell backward. He didn't even have the chance to prepare to make a move. He fell heavily in the heavy rain and died with his eyes open. The old ghost died just like that. This scene was simply too terrifying. The old ghost was an existence that even Chang Baji felt a little scared of. How could he suddenly die without even having the chance to make a move? How terrifying was this woman? Was she a human or a ghost? All of this actually didn't matter, because at least she was here to save Qin Sheng. At this time, the woman had already walked in front of Qin Sheng. She slowly squatted down and looked at Qin Sheng, who was in a sorry state and whose life was uncertain. She said with some distress, "Silly boy, let's go. Aunt will take you home." Chapter 1085. Something really happened. Old Ghost died just like that. His death was a little sudden, a little terrifying, and a little sullen. He was a master whose strength was beyond doubt on Elder Long's side. He was a character whom Elder Long had high hopes on and Chang Baji was afraid of. He was a ruthless person who had carefully followed Qin Sheng for half a month and finally chose the best time to take action. He was a winner who had the upper hand in this assassination and would never lose. Old Ghost died suddenly. Old Ghost's ending was like that of a peerless master in the movies. With a series of dazzling moves, he beat the opponent until he couldn't fight back. Just as he was about to have the last laugh, a passerby with unknown strength suddenly appeared and killed Old Ghost in one move. Even Old Ghost found it hard to believe, not to mention everyone present. But it was a fact that Old Ghost was dead. Unknowingly, the woman's appearance had changed into a completely different appearance from before. If Old Ghost was still alive, he would probably be scared to death again. Why was this like changing faces in Sichuan opera? If Qin Sheng was still awake, if he could still recognize this woman, then he would realize that from the first time he saw this woman, to her appearance just now, to the current appearance of this woman, this was already the third appearance of this woman. The only difference was that this woman's appearance was very beautiful every time, so beautiful that it was a little unreal. The woman held Qin Sheng in her arms and walked into the woods quietly. Finally, she disappeared from sight. As for the scene of the incident, there were only corpses left. Anyone who saw it would be terrified. At the Shenzhen airport, Chang Baji had already met Hao Lei, Fu Rong, and He Wei. When he saw Chang Baji, Hao Lei asked nervously, "Lao Chang, what happened? What happened to Qin Sheng?" If it was not an emergency, Chang Baji would not have called them to go to Ningbo at this time. Because of this, Hao Lei was very worried. Qin Sheng was attacked in Ningbo. Chang Baji replied simply. Hao Lei was shocked. "What happened? What's the situation now? Is Qin Sheng hurt?" "The Lin family is on their way. The current situation is unknown, so I told you to go to Ningbo immediately," Chang Baji said in a low voice. There was still no news until now, which made Chong Baji more and more worried. If something really happened, he wouldn't be able to explain it to Qin Ran. When he was on the way, he called the Lin family again. However, the Lin family had not arrived at the scene of the incident. They had not called him back yet. The most important thing was that he still could not get in touch with Qin Sheng. Fu Rong and He Wei had already guessed what was going on. They frowned and said, "I told you that we must have someone by his side. That way, we can guarantee that nothing will happen. Who knows if he will take the risk out of desperation? Why didn't you listen to me?" Hale looked at He Wei and said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. Moreover, this is Qin Sheng's decision. What can we do? Stop quarreling. Let's get to Ningbo first. As for the others, we'll wait for the news from the Lin family," Chong Baji said firmly. Hale stopped talking. Fu Rong looked at He Wei and said, "Report to Old Master immediately. See if he can contact our friends in Ningbo." In Beijing, in Old Master He's courtyard house. The old man was in a good mood today. He was feeding the fish in the pavilion. When the wind blew, the housekeeper hurriedly came over to let him in, telling him not to catch a cold. As soon as the old man stood up, he received a call from He Wei. He had a hunch that something bad must have happened to him. As expected, after he answered the call, He Wei said, "Old Master, something happened to Qin Sheng in Ningbo." The old man's heart suddenly skipped a beat. In Ningbo, when Lin Changhe arrived at the scene with the rest of the Lin family, the woman had already disappeared with Qin Sheng. The Lin family's cars were parked a little far away. The Ningbo police arrived a few minutes earlier than them. Seeing such a terrible scene, they had already cordoned off the area and reported to the leaders of the municipal bureau, asking for help. With such a huge incident happening, probably no one would dare to hide it from him. Lin Changhe saw the situation over there from a distance, especially the 5 or 6 corpses lying on the ground. He was completely dumbfounded and his mood fell to the bottom. Thinking of the fact that he could not get in touch with Qin Sheng until now, Lin Changhe seemed to have guessed the most dreaded possibility. If that was the case, the sky of Ningbo would fall. After getting out of the car, Lin Changhe felt a little weak in his legs. Although he was used to all kinds of big scenes, he still did not dare to walk over. He had to be supported by Lin Zhe and the others to go over. The only thing he prayed for was that Qin Sheng would be fine. He hoped that Qin Sheng's dead body was not among them. Otherwise, the whole Lin family would not be able to hold on, not to mention him. However, it seemed that the hope was somewhat slim. Before they walked far, Lin Changhe and the others were stopped by the police. Lin Changhe said in a trembling voice, "Who's the person in charge?" "I'm Lin Changhe from the Lin family. I've already called your leader." The Lin family was powerful in Ningbo. Everyone knew about it. The person in charge, who was checking the scene, guessed that the Lin family had arrived because it was the Lin family who had asked the police for help. He hurried over to greet them and introduced himself. At the same time, he said with a livid face, "Second Master Lin, this is too big. 7 people were killed at the scene. No one can cover it up. I've already reported it to my leader. They are all on their way here." The person in charge did not know what the Lin family wanted to do, nor did he know the relationship between the Lin family in this matter. He could only say this, hoping that the Lin family would be sensible. When Lin Changhe heard that 7 people had died at the scene, he almost passed out. He knew what the person in charge meant, but he had to know whether Qin Sheng was involved in it or not. If Qin Sheng was involved, not to mention Ningbo, even Zhujiang couldn't keep it under control, let alone the Lin family. I don't want to make it difficult for you. I just want to confirm the identity of the dead." Lin Changhe stuttered. He had never been so nervous before. Before the person in charge answered, he directly looked at Lin Zhe and said, "Lin Zhe, you go in and have a look." At this time, Lin Zhe was already scared out of his wits. He was even more scared than Lin Changhe. However, since his second uncle had already said it, he had to bite the bullet and go in. Lin Zhe plucked up his courage and walked in anxiously. He clenched his fists and encouraged himself. Before he arrived at the scene, Lin Zhe directly vomited because the scene was too horrible. He had never seen such a scene before. Fortunately, Lin Zhe was smart, or maybe he did not dare to face the reality. He took out his phone in a hurry, found Qin Sheng's photo, and handed it to the policeman beside him. "Help me check if this man is among the dead." The policeman took the phone and looked at it carefully before he said, "No." Lindsay was stunned for a few seconds. He asked incredulously, "Are you sure? Take a good look at it. Is it true?" The policeman was also a little worried. He took the phone in and looked at it again. After he was sure that there was no one, he came back and said no. Lindsay was instantly overjoyed. He ran over in a hurry and said, second uncle, there is no Qin Sheng. There is no Qin Sheng." When he heard the news, Lin Changhe suddenly fainted. He had been tired for several days because of the old lady's affair. He was nervous all the way here, especially when he saw the scene. He was overjoyed when he was sure that Qin Sheng was not among the dead. Lindsay and the others hurried to help Lin Changhe get in the car to rest. After a while, the Lin family figured out the identity of the dead, but the result made them nervous again. That was, although Qin Sheng was not among the dead, the two bodyguards of the Qin family and the driver of the Lin family were all dead. As for the other 4 people, they did not know them. They might be killers. Then what about Qin Sheng? Was he dead or alive? After Lin Changhe woke up, he did not dare to hide the news. He contacted the Ningbo Municipal Public Security Bureau and other departments to find Qin Sheng's whereabouts. On the other hand, he called Chang Baji immediately. Because this matter involved a lot of people, he did not dare to hide it, especially the Zhu family behind the Qin family. At Shenzhenbao, an airport, Chang Baji and the others were waiting in the waiting hall to board the plane. At this time, Lin Changhe finally called. After the call was put through, Lin Changhe immediately repeated the situation here to Chang Baji. He tried to use the simplest words to make it clear. However, after Chang Baji heard it, his phone directly fell to the ground, because he was very clear about how serious this matter was. This time, something really happened. Chapter 1086. The situation in Ningbo was very clear. The 2 bodyguards of the Qin family died tragically. The Lin family chauffeur had lost his life. The rest of the corpses should be the killers who came to kill Qin Sheng, and the Ningbo police had already started to investigate this big case under the urging of the Lin family. As for how many assassins were on the move, whether it was all the assassins here or if other assassins had escaped, no one knew. Furthermore, the identities of these assassins were still unknown. Was Qin Sheng dead or alive? The Lin family did not dare to make a conclusion. However, they all knew that there were 3 possibilities. One was that Qin Sheng was lucky enough to escape and was still alive. The other possibility was that Qin Sheng was already dead. These killers were only a part of them. The others had already escaped after killing Qin Sheng. The third possibility was that other killers took Qin Sheng away. At present, the possibility of the second possibility was very small. Otherwise, Qin Sheng's body should be here. It was impossible for them to leave with the body. The first and third possibilities were the most probable. If it was the first one, it would be the best. It would not take long for Qin Sheng to contact them. If it was the third possibility, it was still acceptable. As long as Qin Sheng was not dead, everything was possible. However, the current situation was no longer something that the Lin family could control. Only the Qin family and the Zhu family could mobilize more resources. Therefore, Lin Changhe contacted Chang Baji immediately. Although Chang Baji had the contact information of the Zhu family, he dared not disturb Lin Changhe rashly. Lin Changhe's phone call made Chang Baji completely panic. He stood still and his mind went blank. He hadn't lost his composure like this for a long time. Hale shook Chang Baji's shoulder and asked, "Lao Chang, what happened?" After Chang Baji came back to his senses, he said slowly, "Something happened to Qin Sheng." When Chang Baji told the others about what the Lin family had said, Hale, Fu Rong, and He Wei all realized that something terrible had happened. If it was true, Qin Sheng would probably be in danger. "What should we do now?" Hale asked helplessly. Chang Baji forced himself to calm down and said, "At present, this news is confidential. No one is allowed to leak it out. Let's go to Ningbo first to understand the specific situation. As for the rest, let me handle it. After Chang Baji finished speaking, he looked at He Wei and Fu Rong. His meaning was clear. Before they understood what was going on, they must not leak this information. Although He Wei and Fu Rong were a little uncomfortable, they could only respect Chang Baji's decision. At this time, Hao Lei continued to ask, "You didn't inform the Qin family? This news can't be kept a secret." Chang Baji shook his head and smiled bitterly. How could he not inform the Qin family? He had already concealed the news from Qin Ran. If he continued to conceal it at this time, he would not be able to bear the responsibility. Moreover, if the Qin family and the Zhu family behind the Qin family didn't take action, who could control this matter? "I'll make the call," Chang Baji said firmly. Beijing International Trade, CBD. Qin Ran was chatting with Zhao Anji and Chang Sini in the office. Perhaps because Qin Ran was not in a good mood today, Zhao Anji dragged Chang Sini to accompany her to relieve her stress. At this time, Chang Baji called. Qin Ran thought that there was finally news from Qin Sheng's side. It should be fine now. Maybe she was too tired today, so she was so paranoid. Zhao Anji also saw that it was a call from Lao Chang. She smiled and said, "It should be that Qin Sheng has finished his work." Qin Ran did not think much. She picked up the phone and said, "Uncle Chang, has Qin Sheng finished his work?" Qin Ran did not think too much about it. She thought that Qin Sheng would call her back as soon as he finished his work. She subconsciously thought that Chang Baji was with Qin Sheng. Qin Ran, something happened to Qin Sheng. Chang Baji gritted his teeth and said. When hearing this, the smile on Qin Ran's face gradually disappeared. In the end, it was as cold as ice. The light in her eyes also gradually disappeared, and in the end, it was completely dark. At this moment, Qin Ran did not know what was going on in her mind at all. The thing that she was most worried about had happened. Why? She only felt that the sky had collapsed. Her heart began to beat faster, but it became more and more difficult for her to breathe. Bang! Just when Zhao Anji and Chang Sini were confused, Qin Ran suddenly blacked out. She suddenly fainted and fell directly on the sofa. Zhao Anji and Chang Sini were stunned for half a second. When they came to their senses, they rushed over in a hurry and shouted, Qin Ran, what's wrong? What's wrong? The secretaries and assistants outside the door heard the shouting inside and did not know what had happened. They also rushed in hurriedly. One of the secretaries had learned emergency medicine. She quickly ran over and pinched Qin Ran. Someone immediately took out a towel from the bathroom and ran over. Someone had already called 120. The whole office was in a mess in an instant. Actually, Qin Ran was not seriously injured. She just lost consciousness in an instant because of the anxiety. She woke up after a few seconds of pinching. The secretary hurriedly asked, Boss Qin, how do you feel? Qin Ran did not pay attention to her. Instead, she looked at the Aunt Zhao Anji. She did not know when her eyes had turned red. Tears were welling up in her eyes, but her mouth was trembling and she could not say a word. Zhao Anji said anxiously, Ran, what's wrong? What's wrong? At this time, Qin Ran gritted her teeth and said slowly, Aunt, Qin Sheng is in trouble. Bang! The lethality of this sentence was too great. It was like a bolt from the blue. Zhao Anji blacked out and suddenly fell down. This time, she was the one who fainted. The next second, the whole office was in a mess again. In Shenzhen, Chang Baji knew that this news might have an impact on the Qin family, but he still had to inform them. He had been waiting for Qin Ran to scold him because he had decided to hide it from Qin Ran in the beginning. Although it was just a white lie, he did not want Qin Ran to worry before he figured out what was going on. However, no matter what, he had to bear this responsibility. However, Qin Ran did not call Chang Baji again. Chang Baji waited until the plane took off, but did not receive Qin Ran's call. He knew that the Qin family might be in a mess. Now, the only thing they could do was to rush to Ningbo immediately. They had to find Qin Sheng by all means. At the same time, they had to find out who was behind this. In the Qin family's villa, Qin Ran and Zhao Anji had been sent back. At the same time, medical staff were arranged to be on standby. Changsini did not leave them at all. She even gave an order to all the secretaries and assistants present today. If anyone leaked what had happened today, they would be fired immediately. Changsini was very clear about the storm this news could bring. Why didn't Qin Ran call Changbaji? Because Qin Ran directly called the Lin family. After coming to herself, Qin Ran remembered that Changbaji was not in Ningbo, so Changbaji also got the news from the Lin family. Only the Lin family knew what had happened. It was very easy for her to get the contact information of the Lin family. Lin Changhe was in charge of this matter. Now, the Lin family was in a mess, and they were using all the resources to find Qin Sheng. When Lin Changhe received Qin Ran's call, everything was within his expectation. He didn't hide anything and told Qin Ran all the things he knew today. At this moment, Qin Ran knew how serious it was. Therefore, Qin Ran fainted again. Fortunately, there were medical staff around this time. After Qin Ran woke up, she was very weak, but she did not dare to fall down again because she knew she had to rush to Ningbo. However, no one could rest assured about Qin Ran's current condition. Although everyone was against it, Qin Ran was determined to go there. But before leaving, Qin Ran had one thing to do. Because she knew that Qin Sheng's accident was not only related to the Qin family, but also involved in a big conspiracy. Moreover, she could not bear all of this, so she had to inform her uncle and small aunt. From this moment on, the Zhu family officially appeared. Chapter 1087. I got it. Beijing, China Supreme Building. Elder Long had not left yet. He was quietly waiting for the news from Ningbo. However, it seemed that it would take a long time for him to get the news. When Old Ghost reported previously, he said that they were ready to take action. If nothing went wrong, they would finish the task within an hour. At that time, they would definitely take Qin Sheng's life. However, more than an hour had passed. It could be said that Old Ghost had made full preparations for this task. Elder Long also believed that Old Ghost could complete the task smoothly. After all, without the protection of Changbaji and the others, Qin Sheng seemed to be the prey in the mouth of a tiger, who had no chance to resist at all. However, why hadn't Old Ghost reported the situation until now? Could it be that there was an accident? Elder Long did not take the initiative to contact Old Ghost. He only had one-way communication with Old Ghost. As for the others, they were not qualified to contact him at all. Old Ghost would naturally contact him after the mission was over, and he would never use his own phone to contact him. This was to prevent Elder Long from being implicated if the mission failed. If Old Ghost didn't contact him, then there was only one possibility. The mission had failed. That shouldn't be the case, Elder Long muttered. The man at the back didn't know what Elder Long was waiting for, but he didn't dare to ask anything. He just waited quietly by her side. He heard that Elder Long was going to meet with the big boss of CITIC. Recently, they had been facing financial problems. He knew what was going on. All of this was because of that sixth uncle. He went for wool and came home shorn. It wasn't easy to control the Chang'an faction, but unfortunately, the Chang'an faction was suddenly investigated. This time, even Elder Long was implicated. At that moment, a young man suddenly rushed in. This man was Elder Long's personal guard. Even though he was not as strong as Old Ghost, he was definitely not simple. Most importantly, Elder Long had the intention of nurturing him. The young man was dressed very well, but his expression was rather cold. Elder Long had seen him as soon as he entered, and he seemed to have guessed what was going on. He waved his hand and signaled for the middle-aged man to leave. The middle-aged man didn't say anything and just silently left. The young man bent down and said in a low voice, "Old master, there's news from Ningbo." Elder Long frowned slightly. If Old Ghost had completed the task, he would have reported it to him on his own instead of getting the news from others. Therefore, Elder Long shook his head and said, "It doesn't seem to be good news. The people in Ningbo reported that the mission might have failed. The police have cordoned off the area and prohibited anyone from entering." At the same time, a large number of police officers have been mobilized to search the mountain. I don't know the other details, but the failure of the mission is also their guess, the young man reported truthfully. Elder Long's face was a little gloomy as he asked, "What happened to Qin Sheng?" "I don't know yet. I'm still inquiring about it. I've already arranged for the two people to leave Ningbo. The rest of the things have also been arranged. There won't be any clues," the young man said lightly. Judging from his words, one could feel that he was very experienced in handling affairs. Whether the task failed or succeeded, he had already figured out the countermeasures. Elder Long continued to ask, "How was the Qin family doing?" "Zhao Anji and Qin Ran returned home from the company half an hour ago. I didn't dare to take the risk to inquire about it, but I heard that they are not in good condition. I guess Qin Shang's situation is not optimistic," the young man continued to say. At this time, Elder Long was lost in thought. No matter if the mission failed or succeeded, and no matter if Qin Shang was dead or alive, they would have to face a fierce counterattack. Next, it would be the real time to fight. Although the situation was still unclear, he hoped that Old Ghost would not let him down. Otherwise, this fierce counterattack would be meaningless. After all, they would pay a high price, and it was very likely that their vitality would be greatly damaged. However, if Qin Sheng was not dead, they would really suffer a great loss. Therefore, in the end, Elder Long finally told the young man to keep a close eye on the situation in Ningbo and the Qin family from now on. Once there was any news, he should immediately report to him. Since the result had been obtained, Elder Long didn't need to continue to stay here. He declined a meeting with the big boss and directly went home to prepare for the following things. In Ningbo, the heavy rain had not stopped. The area where the incident happened had been tightly blocked. All the intersections were strictly controlled by the police. No one knew what had happened. The Lin family was indeed powerful. The whole Ningbo police had been dispatched. In order to find Qin Sheng's whereabouts, they began to carry out a carpet search. At the same time, both the Lin family and the Ningbo police had completely blocked the news. No one was allowed to disclose any information. Moreover, only a few people had access to the most important information, especially the specific identity of several people who had died at the scene, and so on. The Lin family was still waiting. He was waiting for the Qin family to arrive. In the West Mountain villa of the Qin family, Qin Ran finally called her uncle. In the end, Qin Ran still dialed her uncle's number. In the past, she would first discuss with her aunt about such matters and only contact her uncle or let her aunt contact her uncle after confirming the countermeasures. But today, Qin Ran couldn't care less. She chose to contact her uncle directly. Because it was a serious matter and she needed to contact her uncle, she went into the study to make this call. Outside, Zhao Anji had already arranged things to go to Ningbo. In order to prevent any more accidents, Zhao Anji had mobilized all the forces of the Qin family this time. She directly called Gong Sun, who was far away, and asked him to take Zhuangzhou, Nangong, and the others to put down their things and go to Ningbo immediately. Gong Sun was wondering what had happened. Why was Zhao Anji so anxious? Zhao Anji said with mixed feelings, something happened to Qin Sheng. Gong Sun reacted like everyone else. He was shocked for a long time. When he came to himself, Zhao Anji had already hung up. Gong Sun didn't have time to explain to others. He immediately called Zhuangzhou, Nangong, Yujbak, and the others to gather at the airport. The others who received the call were also confused. But Gong Sun didn't explain to them. He didn't need to explain anything. When they arrived in Ningbo, everything would be clear. At least for now, he had to keep this secret. In the study, Qin Ran dialed that familiar yet strange number. It was familiar because it was her uncle, but it was strange because the number of times she contacted her uncle was getting less and less. Unless there was something serious, the younger generation didn't dare to disturb her uncle. After all, her uncle was in a high position. This was also the rules set by her grandfather and grandmother. The younger generation also had to abide by it. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. This was the family rule and the family education. In the past, before her grandfather retired, they had to make an appointment in advance every time they wanted to see her grandfather. Unless her grandfather wanted to see them, he wouldn't take the initiative to contact them. Later, when her grandfather retired, they could see her grandfather often. Later, when her grandfather passed away, her uncle was getting more and more powerful. Her grandmother continued this rule, so it was really difficult for them to see her uncle more than a few times a year. They also rarely called her uncle, unless it was her uncle who called them. But today, she had to make this phone call. Qin Ran first called her uncle's office number. After a while, the phone was connected. It was the secretary of the office who answered the phone. She was not qualified to directly call her uncle's red phone, which was a taboo. After asking, Qin Ran knew that her uncle was not in the office. The secretary didn't disclose her uncle's schedule. This was also a rule, and Qin Ran naturally understood it. So, Qin Ran could only dial her uncle's phone. After a few seconds, the phone was connected. Qin Ran waited until the person on the other side of the phone spoke, because she wanted to make sure that it was her uncle or the secretary who answered the phone, because she didn't know whether her uncle was busy or not. "Hey, Ran, why did you suddenly think of calling me?" Fortunately, Zhu Weihua had just finished a meeting and was resting. Unexpectedly, he received a call from his niece. Qin Ran thought it would be the secretary or someone else. She wanted to ask them to give the phone to her uncle. But when she heard her uncle's familiar voice, Qin Ran couldn't bear it anymore. She burst into tears. Sob, sob, sob. Qin Ran cried very sadly, because she didn't have a mother, and now she couldn't find her father. It seemed that she didn't even have a shoulder to shoulder. So when she heard her uncle's phone call, she was so unscrupulous. Seeing Qin Ran crying, Zhu Weihua panicked. He asked in a hurry, Ran, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? You should tell me first." Zhu Weihua didn't think much about it. He didn't think that something had happened to the old lady, because if something had happened, the hospital would have contacted him directly instead of Qin Ran. "Uncle, Qin Sheng is in trouble." Qin Ran almost finished this sentence in a choked voice. Although it was intermittent, Zhu Weihua still understood what was going on. After confirming what was going on, Zhu Weihua didn't panic at all. After all, as a person in a high position, he still had this bit of calmness. He quickly judged that it might be a bit serious. Otherwise, Qin Ran wouldn't have cried so sadly. However, everything was not clear yet. So after a long time, Zhu Weihua just said, "I got it." Then he hung up the phone. Qin Ran's current state was not suitable for talking, so he could only contact someone else. Chapter 1088. No matter how strong Qin Ran was, she couldn't stand it anymore. During this period, she had been exhausted by the Qin family's affairs. Now such a big thing happened, which directly broke down all the defenses in her heart, because her brother was her bottom line. After her mother passed away, her brother went missing. For this reason, she didn't like Qin Chang'an for so many years. Most of the time, she was close to the Zhu family. It was not that she didn't love her father, but she complained that he couldn't find her brother. She had been waiting for her brother for more than 20 years. Now that her brother had finally come back, the Qin family was in such a crisis. Her powerful father had fallen just like that. Qin Ran panicked and realized that her father was really old. However, her brother came back. Otherwise, she couldn't stand it alone. But now, even her brother was in trouble. Qin Ran broke down completely. Although her uncle and aunt were still in the Qin family, her uncle hadn't shown up yet. Moreover, he had been a monk for so many years. How could he help? As for her aunt, she couldn't stand it anymore. Moreover, her family didn't have much influence anymore. They could only help the Qin family to collect information or take charge of the Qin family's company. Now that her brother was in trouble, Qin Ran could only turn to her uncle for help. Only her uncle could help her. Hearing her uncle's voice, Qin Ran felt at ease and wronged. That was why she cried unscrupulously. Just like that, she hugged her phone and cried in pain. When her emotions gradually recovered, she realized that her uncle had already hung up the phone. However, she knew that since her uncle already knew about this, he definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch. Next, she just had to wait for the news. However, she had to go to Ningbo now. She had to know what was going on. On the other side, after Zhu Weihua hung up the phone, he was lost in thought and said nothing. It couldn't be an ordinary thing. Otherwise, Qin Ran wouldn't have broken down like this. As for how serious it was, Zhu Weiguo could only ask Zhu Qingwen. She should have known it. After all, Qin Ran used to tell her small aunt first. Zhu Weiguo usually contacted this little sister the most. Of course, there was also her husband. After all, they were of the same generation. Sometimes, Zhu Qingwen would take the initiative to call him. The brother and sister chatted and talked about family matters. Zhu Qingwen even knew when to call him. Zhu Weiguo used his personal phone to call his sister. At this time, Zhu Qingwen was in the office of Fudan University giving instructions to her colleagues. When she heard the phone ring, she subconsciously wanted to hang up, but when she saw that it was her brother's phone call, Zhu Qingwen was a little stunned. After all, her brother rarely called her. Most of the time, she took the initiative to call her brother. Besides, even if Big Brother called her, he would call at night. He should be busy now. Why would he call her? Therefore, Zhu Qingwen concluded that something must have happened. As for what it was, he didn't know. Zhu Qingwen picked up her mobile phone and gestured for her colleagues to leave first. These colleagues also left sensibly, knowing that it should be a call from an important person. After all, they all knew that Zhu Qingwen's family background was very powerful, and the leaders of the entire Fudan University had to be courteous to her. At this time, Zhu Qingwen slowly picked up the phone and said, half-jokingly, "Brother, if there's anything, just tell me." Upon hearing this, Zhu Weiguo had already guessed that Zhu Qingwen still did not know what had happened to Qin Sheng. He said in a low voice, "It seems that you still do not know what happened to Qin Sheng." Hearing this, Zhu Qingwen was stunned for a few seconds before she asked, "What? Something happened to Qin Sheng?" Ran just called me in tears. Now I still don't know what happened. I thought you already knew, but I didn't expect that you still don't know. Then you call the Qin family and find out what happened. I'll wait for your call. Zhu Weiguo did not explain too much and directly arranged the arrangement. Zhu Qingwen said with a heavy heart, "Okay, I'll ask the Qin family now." After hanging up the phone, Zhu Qingwen began to think about this problem. In the past, Qin Ran would discuss with her first if there was anything. This time, she directly called her brother, which meant that the matter was somewhat serious. Something happened to Qin Sheng? How serious was it? Did something happen to Qin Sheng himself, or something else? Zhu Qingwen could not wait to call Zhao Anji. Zhao Anji must be with Qin Ran. Maybe she knew what was going on better than anyone else. In the Qin family's villa, Zhao Anji was not too surprised when she saw Zhu Qingwen's call, as if this was all within her expectations. She slowly picked up the phone and said, "It seems that you already know." Zhao Anji was so straightforward, but her tone was a little low. Zhu Qingwen did not care about this and directly asked, "What on earth happened? What happened to Qin Sheng? How is Ran?" Alas! Zhao Anji let out a long sigh and began to repeat everything she knew. After listening to everything, Zhu Qingwen's face was already extremely ugly. She sat on the chair in a daze. She didn't expect that it would be so serious. It was even more serious than what she had imagined. How could this happen? She did not know how to tell her brother. If the old lady knew about this, wouldn't she faint? Ningbo. Zhu Qingwen did not have time to ask why Qin Sheng went to Ningbo. Her only thought now was to go to Ningbo immediately. No matter what, she must find Qin Sheng. Otherwise, she would not be able to explain to the old lady. Fortunately, it was in Ningbo. Zhu Changshan was from Zhujiang, and the Zhu family was also quite influential in Zhujiang, so she could use some connections. To say the least, even if it was not in Zhujiang, her brother was still there. After that, Zhu Qingwen did not hear what Zhao Anji said at all. She directly hung up the phone and arranged for the driver to send her to Ningbo immediately. Meanwhile, on the way, she called Zhu Weiguo to report the situation. After Zhu Weiguo heard the news, he did not speak for a long time. No one could tell what he was thinking. In the end, he just said lightly, "Go to Ningbo first. If there is any news, inform me at any time. I will call Zhujiang." In the end, the brother and sister discussed one thing, which was to keep this matter strictly confidential. Before they found Qin Sheng, they could not let the old lady know. Otherwise, the old lady would not be able to bear it. After hanging up the phone, Zhu Weiguo called Zhujiang 3 times in a row. As for who he called, only he knew. On the way to Ningbo, Zhu Qingwen called her husband Zhu Changshan again and told him what had happened in Ningbo in a seemingly calm manner. Zhu Changshan's reaction was almost the same as Zhu Weigu's. Maybe all the leaders were like this. They would not give up even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. Otherwise, how could they achieve great things? In the end, Zhu Changshan also said that he would call Zhujiang. After all, he used to be in charge of the political and legal system in Zhujiang. As long as it was within the scope of compliance, he would not be stingy this time. Moreover, such a big thing had happened. Therefore, the first person to arrive in Ningbo was none other than Zhu Qingwen. After all, it was closer to drive from Shanghai to Ningbo. The others all rushed here by plane. Before Zhu Qingwen arrived in Ningbo, this matter had already alarmed many people. The leaders of Ningbo directly received calls from several major leaders of the province, which made them realize the seriousness of this matter. Originally, they had thought that it was only a matter of the Lin family. At the same time, the provincial department had also sent a special task force headed by the deputy director to Ningbo to take over this matter. At the same time, several other leaders were on their way. Since it was raining in Ningbo and it was a mountainous area, after the search in Ningbo was difficult, the Ningbo Armed Police Corps directly came to help. All of this was the power of the Zhu family. And it was just the beginning, because at present, the Zhu family only focused on finding Qin Sheng. They did not care about who the mastermind was at all. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, not to mention what would happen to the old lady, it would be a direct slap in the face of the Zhu family. The Zhu family could ignore Qin Sheng on, but they could not ignore Qin Sheng. Moreover, it was directly aimed at people's lives. In an instant, dark clouds were hanging over Ningbo. The whole Ningbo could feel that something was wrong, because the armed police and policemen on duty were on duty at every intersection. Police cars were patrolling everywhere on the streets. Everyone was asking what had happened. Chapter 1089. In Ningbo, the heavy rain lasted for a long time, which made the search and rescue work very difficult. The search and rescue work didn't end until evening. Unfortunately, it was getting dark at this time, and it would be more difficult to find Qin Sheng's trace after dark. Fortunately, this mountainous area was not large, and there were no undulating mountains. Even if the search and rescue work was carried out in a blanket manner, it would not take long for the entire mountainous area to be searched. At that time, the result would be clear at a glance. However, the current situation was that whether Qin Sheng escaped by himself or was he kidnapped by someone else. If he escaped, Qin Sheng would definitely take the initiative to contact them. Even if he was seriously injured, he would definitely not run too far away. He would definitely be in this mountainous area. Even if he was not, he would definitely be within the scope of Ningbo. It was only a matter of time for them to find Qin Sheng. However, if Qin Sheng was kidnapped, it was very likely that he was not in this mountainous area. Maybe he had been taken away. In that case, it would be hard to judge the result. However, when the police played back the various road surveillance cameras in this area, they didn't find any suspicious vehicles. There were only these 2 cars at the scene of the accident. When they checked the surveillance cameras of all the roads related to this car, it seemed that there were only several dead people in the car. What about Qin Sheng? After Zhu Qingwen arrived in Ningbo, the whole thing had been completely handed over from the Lin family to the Zhu family. Such a big thing had happened in Ningbo. Not only the Ningbo police force, but also several leaders in the city also had a headache. If this thing couldn't be handled well, many people might be responsible for it, especially those leaders in the political and legal system. In addition, some leaders' official careers would also be tarnished because of this thing. Lin Changhe had already adjusted his state of mind. Although this thing had gone beyond his tolerance, he could only bear it for the Lin family. After all, Qin Sheng had an accident in Ningbo, and Qin Sheng also came to Ningbo because of the Lin family. It was impossible for the Lin family to escape from the responsibility. However, Zhu Qingwen didn't blame the Lin family at this time. She just asked Lin Changhe about the specific situation and left. She didn't say too much to Lin Changhe. She focused on finding Qin Sheng now. If they could not find Qin Sheng, the Zhu family would really get angry. Maybe because Zhu Weiguo and Zhu Changshun had made a few calls, several leaders from the political and legal system of the province came to Ningbo in person. Ningbo was completely taken over by the provincial office. On the one hand, they were looking for Qin Sheng in the whole city. On the other hand, they were investigating the whole thing, including the killer's identity and the possible traces of other killers, etc. In the old house of the Lin family, everyone was worried. No one had expected that such a thing would happen. The death of the old lady was enough to make everyone sad. However, Qin Sheng's accident made things worse for the Lin family. If the Qin family and the Zhu family blamed the Lin family for this, the Lin family's century-old foundation would really be destroyed. Other people were worried about these things, but Lin Yu was worried about how to explain it to her elder sister. She didn't know that her grandma had passed away, and now her brother-in-law had an accident. If her elder sister knew this, how could she bear it? At this moment, there were only 3 men, Lin Chongting, Lin Chonghe, and Lin Zhe, in the living room of the Lin family. The others were resting in their own rooms. After all, they had been busy these days. Now, tell me, what should we do about this? Although Lin Chongting was no longer in charge of the family affairs, he had to show up for such a big thing. Lin Zhe was a little worried. Dad, is Qin Sheng really dead? Lin Chongting let out a long sigh and said, You should pray that nothing bad happens to him. If he really dies, the Lin family will have to die with him. Lin Zhe frowned and said, The Qin family and the Zhu family won't be so unreasonable, will they? After all, it's not our Lin family who did it. They have to be reasonable. Besides, Susu is Qin Sheng's girlfriend. With this relationship, they won't do it, will they? Lin Chongting said pessimistically, If Qin Sheng is fine, they may not blame us. If he is dead, they won't care about it. At this time, Lin Chonghe looked at his elder brother and said, Now is not the time to talk about this. We should try our best to cooperate with the Qin family and the Lin family and find a way to find Qin Sheng. As long as Qin Sheng is fine, he will bear it for us. But now I am worried about Susu. There was something that Lin Chonghe did not say. If Qin Sheng really died in Ningbo this time, and the Zhu family and the Qin family wanted to get even with them, they could only use the baby in Lin Su's belly, which was the last amulet of the Lin family. Anyway, the baby in Lin Su's belly was the flesh and blood of the Qin family and also Qin Sheng's child. They should be lenient. Lin Zhe let out a long sigh and said, What about Susu? What was going on? The Lin family was really unlucky this year. Lin Chonghe said helplessly, What else can we do? We can only continue to hide it. Compared with Lin Chongting and Lin Zhe, Lin Chonghe had a bigger headache. The old lady's death was not over yet, and now this thing happened. Lin Su was pregnant, so they couldn't let anything happen to her. This was also the way out for the Lin family, so they had to keep it a secret. Therefore, Lin Chonghe could only ask Xue Qingyan for help. After all, Xue Qingyan was accompanying Lin Su in Los Angeles now. Whether Lin Su would know about it or not depended on how Xue Qingyan handled it. However, it was not the right time. It was still night in Los Angeles. Lin Chonghe would find time to call Xue Qingyan at night. He did not know whether Xue Qingyan had already known about it or not. After all, Xue Qingyan had a strong background. In the evening, Chang Baji and the others in Shenzhen, Qin Ran in Beijing, and Gongsun Nangong and Zhuangzhou Dalian had all arrived in Ningbo. The Lin family had vacated a 5-star hotel for the Qin family in advance. This big 5-star hotel only entertained those who were related to Qin Sheng. The security guards of the hotel were all replaced by the trusted subordinates of the Lin family. At the same time, the Qin family was in charge of it, and the bodyguard of the Qin family were also placed in important positions by Chang Baji. Zhu Qingwen had come back from the Municipal Public Security Bureau. This time, she would be fully responsible for the things in Ningbo. Of course, only she had the confidence to communicate with the authorities. After all, she represented the Zhu family, and she was supported by Zhu Weiguo and Zhu Changshun. In the presidential suite, the members of the Qin family were discussing countermeasures. Everyone already knew what had happened. It was not the time to be sad. They should find Qin Sheng first. Qin Ran sat on the sofa and looked terrible. Nangong and Fu Rong were taking care of her by her side. Chang Baji was talking with Shuang Zhou and Gong Sun. The others, such as Hao Lei, He Wei, Ba, and Brother Wu, were sitting around. Zhu Qingwen had said that they would talk about it after she came back, so the Qin family could not make a decision on their own. Zhao Anji did not come to Ningbo. After all, the Qin family still needed her to manage the overall situation. No matter Chang Baji or Zhuang Zhou, Gongsun regarded them as the Qin family's people. At this time, he naturally had to discuss countermeasures with them. Moreover, they knew better than anyone else what had happened during this period. I think this thing is a little dangerous, Zhuang Zhou said pessimistically. There had been no news until now, and Qin Sheng did not take the initiative to contact them. Obviously, it was dangerous. Gongsun said calmly, "We will not give up until the end. Even if the ending is not satisfactory, we must take revenge." "Who do you think it is?" Zhuang Zhou asked casually. Chang Baji replied without hesitation. "Except for Old Long and Sixth Uncle, I really can't think of anyone who is so powerful. It seems that this time we have to settle old and new grudges together," Gongsun said silently. If it was really Old Long, they really had to settle all the scores. Not only the Qin family, but also the Zhu family. At this time, Chang Baji said, "I want to go to the Municipal Public Security Bureau to check the identity of the deceased. I have been with Qin Sheng for such a long time, and I have seen all kinds of forces. Maybe I can recognize one or two of them. At that time, we will know who the mastermind is." Gongsun said thoughtfully, "Don't be anxious. When the Zhu family arrives, we will talk about it then." Chang Baji nodded. He was not in a hurry. After all, the current focus was to find Qin Sheng. At this time, the door of the suite was pushed open. Zhu Qingwen, who was dressed in sportswear, walked in quickly, followed by two policemen in uniform. Chapter 1090. All the members of the Qin family had arrived in Ningbo, but they were not as important as Zhu Qingwen. After all, the Qin family was not as powerful as it used to be. Although it was not in dire straits, it had become cold because of Qin Chang'an's accident. Some people even avoided the Qin family for fear of getting into any trouble. This was the reality of the society, and there was no need to be so fragile. On the contrary, the Zhu family was flourishing with each passing day. It seemed that the Zhu family's position had been established since the time of old Master Zhu's death. Perhaps most people thought that the Zhu family would decline after old Master Zhu passed away. Who could have thought that old Master Zhu's son and son-in-law were so outstanding? No one would have thought that Zhu Weiguo would rise so quickly in the military and eventually reach the position he was in today, becoming the real boss of the military. As for Zhu Zhangshan, although he was the son-in-law of the Zhu family, he had truly inherited old Master Zhu's political legacy and became a rising political star on old Master Zhu's side. Many big shots had high hopes for him, and Zhu Zhangshan did not disappoint them. Now, he was in charge of Shanghai. Everyone knew what it meant to be in charge of Shanghai. As long as Zhu Changshan did not make too big a mistake, he would almost certainly go to the capital city. Moreover, how could he easily make a mistake when he was in charge of Shanghai? Zhu Weiguo was Zhu Qingwen's biological brother, and Zhu Changshan was Zhu Qingwen's husband. Therefore, it was obvious how important Zhu Qingwen was. The Qin family was in dire straits, and the Zhu family was at its peak. Of course, the Qin family had no objection to the Zhu family's decision. Therefore, everyone was waiting for Zhu Qingwen to arrive. Zhu Qingwen was wearing sportswear and looked very capable. However, she did not look good because she had not rested since she arrived in Ningbo. She had been busy. Not only did she have to keep abreast of the situation in Ningbo, but she also had to meet various bosses and report the situation to Zhu Weiguo and Zhu Changshan. Zhu Qingwen was already tired from the long journey, and now she was mentally and physically exhausted. How could she not be tired? After Zhu Qingwen came in, the two policemen went out, but they did not leave. They stood outside the door. They were the guards arranged by Ningbo to protect Zhu Qingwen. After all, Zhu Qingwen's identity was special. She subconsciously got up and ran to Zhu Qingwen. It was as if she had finally found her backbone after seeing Zhu Qingwen. She hugged Zhu Qingwen and cried with reddened eyes. Zhu Qingwen's eyes were red. Zhu Qingwen held Qin Ran in her arms and comforted her as she said, Ran, it's all right. Small Anne is here. Everything is under Small Anne's care. She had always felt that this pair of brother and sister had a hard life. Not to mention that they had lost their mother since they were young. Qin Sheng had been missing for so many years, and Qin Ran had waited for so many years. It wasn't easy for the sister and brother to reunite, but they didn't expect that there would be a change in the family not long after. Now that such a big thing happened, how could Zhu Qingwen not be distressed? After a long time, Qin Ran gradually calmed down. Zhu Qingwen pulled Qin Ran to sit on the sofa. Only then did the others greet Zhu Qingwen. Zhu Qingwen just nodded slightly. He knew some of the people from the Qin family, and some didn't. Zhu, many people. What had to speak, Gu? Ming, many people. When to Guyugi to go? Qin Ran asked. Andy, is there any progress? Zhu Qingwen shook her head. Not yet. The police and the armed police are searching the mountain. As long as it doesn't rain tonight, they will finish searching the whole area. Then we will know the specific situation. What if Qin Sheng is not there? Qin Ran asked. Her question was the same as others. Zhu Qingwen said, It is very unlikely that he is not there. The police have checked all the cars that entered the mountain during that time. Except for a few cars at the scene, there is nothing wrong with the others. So it is almost impossible for Qin Sheng to leave. Gongsun asked, Is there any other deployment in Ningbo? Of course it is possible. So the police have other plans. They are checking suspicious targets in the whole city. At the same time, they have blocked the access to Ningbo. But there is no progress yet. Zhu Qingwen frowned. It was not the police in Ningbo. The deputy director of the provincial department was in charge of it. Meanwhile, the armed police in Ningbo cooperated with them. It was obvious that all parties attached great importance to this matter. The Zhu family put so much pressure on them. So many leaders called them, who dare not to take it seriously. Zhuang Zhou said lightly. So you mean we can only wait for the news now? What do you think? Zhu Qingwen looked at Zhuang Zhou and asked. Zhuang Zhou said without thinking. We can only wait for the news here. We can only be anxious. I want to go to the mountain area to find Qin Sheng with some people from the Qin family. I have lived in the mountains in the northeast for many years. I am more experienced in this aspect. Maybe it will be helpful. Zhu Qingwen thought for a while and said, Well, okay. I will inform them later. Chang Baji asked again, Have you found out the identity of these killers? It is easy to find out the identity of these killers, but there is no other useful information. So, it is difficult to find out who the mastermind is, Zhu Qingwen said honestly. The police were still investigating and had asked for help from all sides. Chang Baji continued, I want to see the killer's body. I have followed Qin Sheng for a long time. If he is his enemy, maybe I can recognize him. Hearing this news, Zhu Qingwen's expression changed slightly. No matter whether they could find Qin Sheng or not, this was the problem that the Zhu family had to face in the end. If Chang Baji could recognize the killer, they could prepare for a rainy day. Are you sure you can recognize him? Zhu Qingwen stared at Chang Baji and said. At this moment, Zhu Qingwen's aura was so strong that Chang Baji was a little afraid. Chang Baji said honestly, I can try, but I may not recognize him. Zhu Qingwen thought for a while and said, I will arrange it now. Ran, stay in the hotel and don't go anywhere. This is your uncle's order. Zhu Qingwen held Qin Ran's hand tightly and said in a low voice. Qin Sheng had been in trouble. Qin Ran must be safe. Otherwise, she would not be able to explain to the old lady. Qin Ran did not refute this time. She nodded obediently. After saying this, Zhu Qingwen stood up and made a phone call. Soon, everything was arranged. Zhuang Zhou left the hotel with Nangong Haolei and the others and went to the mountain area. Chang Baji went to the Municipal Public Security Bureau alone. Everyone went to work separately. But the news they wanted to hear most was that Qin Sheng had been found. In the morgue of the Municipal Public Security Bureau, The forensic doctors were investigating the cause of death of these corpses. It was a big case this time. It was said that the provincial department had sent people here directly. The leaders in the city were under a lot of pressure. Maybe many leaders would be responsible for this. After all, it happened in Ningbo. Therefore, the leaders in the Municipal Public Security Bureau gave them a strict order to find out the cause of death of these corpses. At first, they thought that it was just a normal fatal wound, but the last 2 corpses died in a strange way. It was as if they had inhaled some unknown gas, especially the body of the last old man. Other than a few non-fatal knife wounds, what really killed him were the foreign objects and a few key acupuncture points on his body. They had taken out the foreign objects. They were shocked to find the silver needles smeared with poison. Just as they continued to study, the leader walked in with Chang Baji and asked them to open all the corpses so that Chang Baji could identify them one by one. Chang Baji was used to seeing death. Even though he was facing 7 swollen corpses here, he was not afraid at all. He slowly walked forward and began to identify the corpses. These forensic doctors were a little confused about the identity of this middle-aged man. They thought that he was the external help that the leader had invited from other places. After all, they were still a little confused about the cause of death of the last corpse. Chang Baji stared at the corpses in front of him with a serious face. He had already recognized the 2 bodyguards of the Qin family. They died miserably, which made Chang Baji feel sorry for them. Not long ago, they were normal people who were laughing and laughing. Now they were lying here. The knife wounds on their bodies were especially horrible. Except for the 2 bodyguards, Chang Baji didn't know the others. They should be killers. They died miserably, which showed how fierce the battle had been. Chang Baji was a little disappointed because he didn't know any of these killers. If he didn't know them, he wouldn't know who the murderer behind the scenes was. When Chang Baji walked in front of the last corpse, he subconsciously stopped. It was also because the cause of death of this corpse still needed to be studied, so the forensic doctors put his body last. When Chang Baji saw this corpse, he instantly felt a sense of familiarity. The next second, Chang Baji recognized the man. He was a little shocked and surprised. It's him. Chapter 1091. Hope is Slim Chang Baji had followed Qin Sheng for several years, so he knew very well who Qin Sheng's enemies were. The things that Qin Sheng had done in the past were almost settled. He did not have any worries anymore. The only danger was Third Master Wu, who had been killed. Because of what Third Master Wu's adopted son had said, no one knew whether the conspiracy would be leaked or not. No one knew who would avenge Third Master Wu. For example, people like Yang Deng. Although Yang Deng had cut ties with Qin Sheng and would never see him again, no one knew whether there was someone like Yang Deng. Therefore, after Qin Sheng had an accident in Ningbo, Chang Baji first thought that it might be Third Master Wu's people. However, based on Qin Sheng's current influence, it was quite impossible for Third Master Wu to kill Qin Sheng easily. Moreover, Qin Sheng was followed by 2 bodyguards of the Qin family. The strength of these 2 bodyguards was not simple. They could be regarded as relatively excellent among the bodyguards of the Qin family. Therefore, Chang Baji thought that it might be someone from Shenzhen or Dalian. However, they were busy with their own affairs now. How could they be so powerful? Besides, if they did so, they would completely offend the Qin family. At that time, even their bones would not be left. In the end, Chang Baji could only think that it was Elder Long and Sixth Uncle's people, because only they could be so powerful. Chang Baji had fought with Elder Long's people several times, so he was very clear about how powerful they were. However, he was not sure who it was. After all, it involved too many things. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, then the Qin family and the Zhu family would avenge him. Actually, Chang Baji just wanted to have a try when he said that he would come to identify the bodies. However, he did not expect that he would really meet an acquaintance. This person was definitely Elder Long and Sixth Uncle's people, because he had fought with him in Beijing before. Looking at the bodies in front of him, Chang Baji came to himself and murmured, "It's really them." Hearing this, the policeman next to him hurriedly asked, "Do you know them?" Chang Baji looked back at him and shook his head. "No, The policeman was a little excited. If the identity of the killer was confirmed, it would only be a matter of time before the case was solved. Everyone knew how much pressure the whole Ningbo public security system was under. It was said that the identity of the young man who had the accident was not simple. It directly alarmed the high-level officials in all aspects of the province. Even the provincial department directly sent the second-in-command to Ningbo to take charge of this matter. Chang Baji didn't stay there for long before he left. He didn't dare to waste any more time and immediately took a taxi back to the hotel. When he returned to the hotel, it was already dark outside, and it started to rain. This made Chang Baji a little depressed because the chances of finding Qin Sheng were getting smaller and smaller. The more time passed, the slimmer the hope became. No matter if Qin Sheng had escaped or been kidnapped, it would be the same. If it was the former, Qin Sheng was likely to die from serious injuries. After all, Qin Sheng had not contacted them for so long. As for the latter, Qin Sheng's chances of survival were even slimmer. No matter whether those people escaped or not, some of them could kill Qin Sheng. However, Chang Baji was still puzzled. That old man was so powerful. How could he have died on the spot? This was something that Chang Baji couldn't understand. After all, he had fought with this old man and knew that the old man was probably more powerful than him. In addition, the old man had brought several helpers with him. According to Master Long's style of doing things, since he could make such a thorough plan this time, investigate Qin Sheng's whereabouts so clearly, and finally choose the best opportunity to take action, how could he not bring a few masters with him? As for Qin Sheng's side, he was very clear about Qin Sheng's power. He was definitely not a match for this old man. Even with the 2 bodyguards of the Qin family, it seemed that he would definitely die. Then how did Qin Sheng escape? Chang Baji was somewhat puzzled, very puzzled. All of a sudden, Chang Baji thought of a possibility. Did Qin Sheng have helpers? However, he knew almost all the people that Qin Sheng knew. Who could be a match for that old man? The probability seemed to be very low. The more Chang Baji thought about it, the more annoyed he became. He simply stopped thinking about it and went back to tell Zhu Qingwen the news first. When Chang Baji returned to the hotel, Qin Ran, who was exhausted, had already gone to bed. Zhu Qingwen was making a phone call in the living room. When she saw Chang Baji coming back, she signaled him to wait for a while and then continued to make the phone call. Chang Baji didn't know who she was calling, but his background was definitely not simple. After a while, Zhu Qingwen finished making the phone call. It turned out that Zhu Weigua had asked his eldest son, Zhu Qingwen, to come from Jiangsu to help. After all, except for such a big thing, the 2 elders of the Zhu family couldn't show up at all. So Zhu Qingyuan had to come here. Zhu Jiao had nothing to do, but nobody could rest assured with his character. This matter might be spread out immediately. If the old lady found out, it would be a big deal. After Zhu Qingwen hung up the phone, she looked at Chang Baji and asked, Lao Chang, how is it? Do you know him? Yes, Chang Baji said calmly. Hearing this, Zhu Qingwen was stunned subconsciously. She didn't have much hope. Since the old man dared to take action against Qin Sheng, he must have been well prepared. How could he be easily recognized by others? Who? Zhu Qingwen came back to herself and asked. No matter who the old man was, since Chang Baji knew him, she would listen to him. Chang Baji said slowly, He's 6th Uncle Long's man. I fought with the dead old man in the alley outside the Sihiyuan of the Yang family in Beijing. He was much more powerful than me, and he even threatened us. I see. Although Zhu Qingwen had already guessed this possibility, she still found it hard to accept the result. In fact, they had already known that Elder Long, their old enemy, had reappeared. They were just waiting for a chance. However, she couldn't accept the fact that 6th Uncle had tried to kill Qin Sheng. The Zhu family could accept that 6th Uncle had colluded with Elder Long for the interests of the Chang and family. But the Zhu family couldn't accept that 6th Uncle had killed Qin Sheng. Although the Qin family and 6th Uncle had some conflicts now, the 2 families had a long history. Even the Zhu family had some connections with 6th Uncle. Why did it have to be like this? Did he have to cut off the Qin family line? Did he have to challenge the bottom line of the Zhu family? When Qin Sheng and Song Ryu were engaged, Why did the Zhu family show up with such great fanfare? They want to tell everyone that they could do whatever they wanted to Qin Chang'an, because it was Qin Chang'an's business. However, they couldn't do anything to Qin Sheng, because it was the Zhu family's business. Chang Baji didn't dare to hide anything. At this time, he told them his guess and said, "This old man was more powerful than me, so I still have a doubt. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe it's possible." Zhu Qingwen was thinking about something else. Hearing Chang Baji's words, she asked, "What is it?" Chang Baji began to narrate at a moderate pace. A few minutes later, Zhu Qingwen said in surprise, "You suspect that Qin Sheng has helpers?" "Yes. Otherwise, Qin Sheng and the bodyguards of the Qin family couldn't have killed this old man. Moreover, they came prepared." The more Chang Baji thought about it, the more certain he was. Zhu Qingwen was overjoyed. If it was really possible, Qin Sheng would have a great chance to survive. As long as Qin Sheng was alive, how could Zhu Qingwen not be happy? After confirming the details with Chang Baji, Zhu Qingwen asked Chang Baji to leave. After Chang Baji left, she called her brother immediately. It seemed that as they had guessed, it was Elder Long and the others who killed Qin Sheng this time. However, she was a little sad that sixth uncle was involved. Zhu Qingwen couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Why didn't they do it earlier? How could Elder Long and the others dare to take the risk? Zhu Qingwen had been on the phone for a long time. Not only did she talk to Zhu Weiguo, but she also talked to her husband, Zhu Zhangshun. In the past, they had wanted to wait a little longer and make sure that Zhu Zhangshun had improved a little more before they could make a move on Elder Long. But now, since this thing happened, they had to take action in advance. That night, it was raining outside. However, many people in Ningbo didn't fall asleep because they were looking for that young man. When the sky brightened, the result was not satisfactory. The mountain area had been searched thoroughly, but Qin Sheng was still not found. They only found some bloodstains. They were sure that Qin Sheng had left from the mountain, but they couldn't find him. The police in Ningbo also searched all over the city, but they didn't find anything. They caught many fugitives, but they couldn't relieve the pressure in Ningbo. More and more people were under great pressure. However, the police in Ningbo didn't give up. They expanded their search scope. The provincial department also arranged police officers to check all the traffic arteries in the neighboring cities, hoping to find some clues. At dawn, the Qin family was exhausted, but they still couldn't find Qin Sheng. Everyone knew that the longer they waited, the slimmer their hope would be. At dawn, more and more people knew about the news in Ningbo. After all, the movement here was too big. Moreover, the Qin family also made such a big move. Sixth uncle was one of them. When he knew what had happened in Ningbo, he almost fainted from a heart attack. He didn't expect that their ally, Elder Long, would do such a big thing behind their back. Elder Long was going to drive them into a dead end. He was going to tie them up completely. Therefore, before others called sixth uncle, he called them anxiously. If they didn't think of a way, they would really be in trouble because they had offended the public this time. They could do anything, but this was the only thing they couldn't do because it would ruin the Qin family's bloodline. How could the Zhu family tolerate it? Moreover, old lady Zhu was still alive. Moreover, Qin Sheng was the son-in-law of the Song family, and old Master Song was still alive. This was a slap in the face of these old people. At dawn, the Song family also knew about it. When Song Ryu got up and turned on her phone, she received a call from her father before she had time to check the messages and WeChat messages that kept coming in. Qin Sheng's father-in-law told Song Ryu to go to Ningbo as soon as possible. Song Ryu didn't come to her senses for a long time. She didn't know what he meant. Chapter 1092. People could only enjoy life when they were old. Looking back on their lives, most people were confused when they were young, always chasing after those illusory things. When they were middle-aged, they were busy, pressed down by life, and didn't know who they were living for. Only when they were old did they have leisure time, but unfortunately, at this time, they were powerless. Sixth uncle didn't spend his life like this, but it was almost the same. Although the sixth uncle was still busy, he was no longer fighting with others, with himself, and with the world like before. He had already accepted his fate. After all, time waited for no man. Once time passed, there was no turning back. There were no ifs in life. Sixth uncle had a regular schedule. He went to bed early and got up early. He seldom stayed up late. Last night, his subordinates reported to him that the Qin family had made a move. It seemed that the Qin family in Dalian and Shenzhen had suddenly left. Qin Ren seemed to have left Jing City, but they hadn't found out what was going on. Sixth uncle said that they should find out first. He didn't expect to hear such news when he received the call in the morning. Qin Sheng was assassinated in Ningbo. Now his whereabouts were unknown, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. All the members of the Qin family rushed to Ningbo. When sixth uncle heard this news, he was completely stunned. He subconsciously felt that this was definitely Elder Long's doing. When they met last time, Elder Long said that he was going to make this move. At that time, he stopped Elder Long without hesitation. However, he didn't expect that Elder Long would still make a move in the end. Moreover, he didn't inform them. This was no longer a checkmate. It was a checkmate that would cause both sides to suffer losses. Sixth uncle was angry because they were now allies with Elder Long. They were bound together for good or bad. Elder Long's move would completely bind them together. At that time, the Qin family and the Zhu family behind them would definitely think that this was a decision made by them together. Even if they explained, the Qin family and the Zhu family wouldn't believe them. What was more terrifying was the Song family behind them. If they had parted ways with Elder Long could do whatever he wanted. It had nothing to do with him. However, they were still allies now. What should he do? Sixth uncle directly called Zhe Yuan and the eldest son of the Su family and asked them to hurry to his villa in Shuani. He had something important to discuss. From the beginning until now, the two families had left everything to sixth uncle. They didn't want to worry about it, but they would try their best to do what sixth uncle told them to do. Zhe Yuan didn't think too much and said that he would go there now. However, the eldest son of the Su family said that he still had a meeting in the morning and said that he would come over after he was done. Sixth uncle was furious and said that the sky would fall when he was done. It was not until then that the eldest brother of the Su family took it seriously and asked sixth uncle what had happened. Sixth uncle did not know what had happened in Ningbo. He told him directly that Elder Long had killed Qin Sheng in Ningbo. When the eldest son of the Su family heard the news, he was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. The phone in his hand fell to the ground, and the entire screen was smashed to pieces. When he came back to his senses, sixth uncle had already hung up the phone. The eldest son of the Su family immediately canceled everything and hurried over to sixth uncle. The eldest son of the Su family and the Su Bo. The eldest son of it transference, Su, was not 8 o'clock yet, but many people were already busy. It was the same for the Song family. When they got the news, the two big shots of the Song family were shocked. The one who got the news first was Song Husheng, who was the most well-informed. After all, he had been paying attention to Qin Sheng's movements, especially what Qin Sheng had done in Ningbo. 2 days ago, he had even called Song Ruyu about this. However, to his surprise, Song Ruyu did not take it seriously at all. Thinking back, Song Husheng felt a little bored, but he did not give up. However, he didn't expect that the latest news about Qin Sheng would be so shocking that he didn't know what to do. After Song Husheng heard this news, he didn't believe it easily because this news was too shocking. He first asked his friends to find out about it. Then he tried to find out about it himself. In the end, it seemed to be true. It was early in the morning. Song Husheng didn't inform anyone in the Song family, but he didn't know whether Song Ruyu knew or not. Later, he guessed that she didn't know, otherwise the Song family would have been in a mess. It was not until this morning that he called his father and uncle to tell them about it. They confirmed that Song Ruyu didn't know about it. Otherwise, Song Ruyu would have informed the other members of the Song family. After all, it was such a big deal. Song Husheng didn't know whether he should be happy or not when Qin Sheng was killed. He was not sad. If Qin Sheng really died, the marriage between him and Ruyu would definitely be canceled. There was no doubt about this. In that case, he would get what he wanted. After all, he had been trying to stop this marriage. However, although Song Husheng didn't like Qin Sheng, he really didn't want Qin Sheng to die. This would be a great blow to the Qin family. It would also be a great blow to Ryu. After all, he wasn't that kind of person. However, he still had some complaints about the Qin family. They didn't inform the Song family when such a big thing happened. After all, the Song family was the Qin family's relative. Moreover, Ryu was Qin Sheng's fiancée. Even she, his fiancée, didn't know about it. What did the Qin family want? No matter what, since he knew this news, Song Husheng still informed everyone in the Song family in a well-behaved manner. As for what the Song family would do, Song Husheng was too lazy to worry about it. After all, this matter was beyond his ability. However, he knew that if something really happened to Qin Sheng, no matter who killed him, the Song family would not sit by and do nothing. Song Husheng also felt that although he didn't like Qin Sheng, he was still the son-in-law of the Song family. No matter what the Qin family and the Zhu family thought, Qin Sheng was so unscrupulous. It was absolutely a slap in the Song family's face. The Song family would not tolerate it. After receiving Song Husheng's call, the two elders of the Song family thought that Song Husheng was joking. They reprimanded Song Husheng one after another. It was not until Song Husheng explained it again and again that they completely believed it. At this time, they were a loss. They had never thought that such a big thing would happen. After discussing the countermeasures, the two elders of the Song family asked Song Husheng to continue to pay attention to the situation in Ningbo. On the other hand, they tried to find a way to hide it from Old Master Song, which was almost the same as the Zhu family. On the other hand, they contacted the Qin family. Finally, they informed Song Ryu. Of course, Song Ryu's father was in charge of informing Song Ryu. Song Ryu's father didn't know how to make the call, because he knew that Ryu had a good relationship with Qin Sheng. He also liked Qin Sheng very much. However, he didn't know how to tell this sad news to Ryu and whether she could bear it. No matter what, he had to make the call. Therefore, when Song Ryu finished breakfast and was about to go out, she received the call from her father. Today, she was supposed to hand over her work to her colleagues and catch up with the leaders. At last, she would treat her colleagues to dinner. Starting from tomorrow, she would rest for a period of time, report to her new unit, and start a new journey. She also planned to visit Qin Sheng after her rest. Qin Sheng must have returned to Shenzhen from Ningbo. As for this matter, as long as Qin Sheng didn't take the initiative to tell her, he wouldn't mention it. Anyway, she didn't think it was a big deal. After all, the old lady of the Lin family had passed away. It was reasonable for Qin Sheng to visit her. However, she still felt a little uncomfortable that Qin Sheng didn't tell her about it. However, she was a generous woman and wouldn't care about these trivial things. Moreover, it was possible that Qin Sheng would tell her about it. Everything had been arranged, but all the arrangements were disrupted by a phone call. When she picked up her father's call and heard that he wanted her to go to Ningbo as soon as possible, Song Ryu had a strong premonition. This premonition was very strong because Qin Sheng was in Ningbo. Song Ryu forced herself to calm down and said, "Dad, what happened?" "Something happened to Qin Sheng," Song Ryu's father said bluntly. At that moment, Song Ryu felt dizzy, as if she had fallen into a weightless space. She stumbled and almost fell down, with only the pictures of Qin Sheng in her mind. Song Ryu had never been so flustered, nor had she lost her composure like this. At least, no one could make her feel like this. She had thought that she would break down when her grandfather passed away, but she didn't expect that it would happen today. She hung up without asking what had happened. Since her father called her so anxiously, it must be a matter of life and death. At this moment, Song Ryu suddenly felt that she had lost something. She couldn't catch it no matter how hard she tried. When she came to her senses, her eyes were already red. Song Ryu only knew that no matter how serious the matter was, she had to go to Ningbo as soon as possible. She didn't want to waste any time. Chapter 1093. No matter how strong a woman was, she would break down one day, and Song Ryu was no exception. Song Ryu had complicated feelings for Qin Sheng, but she really liked him. Of course, she had known Qin Sheng since childhood. If she hadn't known Qin Sheng since childhood, she might not have fallen in love with him. After all, she had known too many talented young men, many of whom were more outstanding than Qin Sheng. Of course, it was also because of the engagement between the two families. Love was a different story for everyone, and everyone had a different understanding of it. However, love was love, and nothing could replace it. For Song Ruyu, Qin Sheng was an irreplaceable person. Without Qin Sheng, she might not have fallen in love, and she would have found a random man to marry in 2 years. However, Qin Sheng's appearance had made her world wonderful again. It had never occurred to her that Qin Sheng would be in trouble all of a sudden. Song Ruyu rushed out of the house with her bag. She didn't have time to ask for leave. She just wanted to go to Ningbo as soon as possible. What she feared most was that she wouldn't be able to see Qin Sheng for the last time if she was late. It was a pity that she didn't know what had happened to him. On the way to the airport, Song Ruyu's father called her again. This time, he told Song Ruyu that he had already bought 2 tickets to Ningbo for her. If Song Ruyu couldn't make it this time, she would catch the next one. Although Song Ruyu was in a panic, she looked calm. She didn't ask anything else, such as what had happened to Qin Sheng. Instead, she asked, "Dad, who told you that?" Song Ruyu's father was stunned. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "He Sheng told me." Hearing this, Song Ruyu's expression changed slightly. She hung up the phone without saying anything. The Song family must have known about this through other channels. Since Qin Sheng was in such a big trouble, the Qin family naturally knew better than anyone else what was going on. Presumably, all the members of the Qin family were already in Ningbo, but why didn't they tell her? She was Qin Sheng's fiancée. Didn't she deserve to know this news? Song Ruyu was more or less angry. This time, she was really angry. She did not hesitate. She really wanted to know what had happened. So she called Qin Ran directly and asked her what she knew better than anyone else. In the suite of the Ningbo Hotel, Qin Ran had already gotten up. At this moment, she was listening to her small aunt's phone call in the living room. From her expression, it could be seen that she did not get the results she wanted. The news from all sides in Ningbo still did not find Qin Sheng, and the hope was getting smaller and smaller. Qin Ran's mood was as gloomy as the sky outside. She felt like she was sleepwalking and had no idea what she was thinking or doing. At this time, Zhu Qingwen just finished a phone call. Although she was also very disappointed, she could not show it. She forced a smile and comforted her. They said that they have some clues. They are continuing to search for it. We should get some news today. Qin Ran was not stupid. Of course, she knew that small aunt was comforting her. She had no choice but to say, "Okay, brother will be fine." At this moment, Qin Ran's phone rang. She thought it was someone else from the Qin family, but when she picked up the phone and saw the name of the caller, she panicked. At this moment, she remembered that she had forgotten something important. That was, she did not inform Song Ruyu immediately when such a big thing happened to Qin Sheng. After all, Song Ruyu was Qin Sheng's fiancée. Qin Ran was at a loss. She had been too anxious and had been busy since yesterday. She did not think about this at all. At this moment, she did not know what to do. Because it was Song Ruyu who took the initiative to call, it meant that she had already known. As for how she knew, Qin Ran did not care about it. Holding the phone, Qin Ran did not know how to answer the call. At this moment, Zhu Qingwen saw that Qin Ran was in a daze. She asked Ran, "What's wrong?" Qin Ran showed the phone number to her small aunt and said, "Ruyu called. You didn't tell her?" Zhu Qingwen instantly understood what was going on. Qin Ran nodded helplessly. After thinking for a while, Zhu Qingwen took the phone and said, "Let me tell her." After answering the call, Zhu Qingwen said directly, "Ruyu, I'm small aunt." Anyway, it was indeed wrong of Qin Ran not to inform Song Ruyu. Such a big thing happened to Qin Sheng, and Song Ruyu, as his fiancée, did not know it. It was unreasonable. However, Zhu Qingwen could understand that Qin Ran was too anxious to think about it, so she had to do it. On the other side, Song Ruyu did not expect that it would be her small aunt, Zhu Qingwen, who answered the phone. She did not know what to say. However, Song Ruyu was still full of resentment. Soon, she came to her senses and asked calmly, "Small aunt, such a big thing happened to Qin Sheng. Am I not qualified to know it?" Of course, Zhu Qingwen knew that Song Ryu would blame him. This little girl had a bad temper, but she knew when to stop. However, this matter was too serious, and Zhu Qingwen guessed that she must be very upset. Ryu, it's all your aunt's fault. Your sister wanted to inform you, but I didn't want you to worry because I didn't know what was going on. Zhu Qingwen could only explain it in this way. She believed that Song Ryu would understand. She was not an unreasonable child. As expected, Zhu Qingwen said so. Moreover, she was an elder, so Song Ryu could not say anything more. She could only say, "Small aunt, I just want to know what happened to Qin Sheng." Zhu Qingwen did not want to tell the truth, but she could not continue to hide it from Song Ryu. She had to tell the truth. He was assassinated. We haven't found him yet. We are still trying to find him. Although Song Ryu knew that something had happened, she did not expect it to be so serious. Originally, she still had some hope in her heart, hoping that Qin Sheng would be fine. However, Zhu Qingwen's words directly crushed the last straw in her heart. She completely panicked and tears came out her eyes. For a moment, she did not know what to say at all. Zhu Qingwen kept comforting Song Ryu, but Song Ryu had no time to listen to her. In the end, Song Ryu restrained her emotions and said in a low voice, "Small aunt, I got it. I'm on my way to the airport. Let's talk about it later." After that, Song Ryu hung up the phone. Zhu Qingwen let out a long sigh and did not know what to say. After Song Ryu hung up the phone, she completely broke down. She had never been so helpless since she was a child. She buried her head between her legs, covered her face with her hands, and cried silently. Her cries were truly heart-wrenching. The taxi driver was an experienced driver who liked to chat with passengers. He had seen all kinds of people. He did not know what had happened to this elegant beauty, so he tried to comfort her. "Miss, did you break up with him?" Song Ryu did not speak. She did not care about this at all. The old man continued. "In today's society, men will change their hearts as soon as they get rich. Don't be too sad. A beauty like you can find any man you want. I know several outstanding young men. Do you want me to introduce them to you?" The old master was so talkative that he kept talking. Unfortunately, Song Ryu didn't hear a word of it. Song Ryu wiped away her tears and raised her head. After venting, she felt much better. At this moment, Song Ryu seemed to have returned to her original self. Of course, she knew that crying would not solve any problems. Only by having a strong heart could one face everything. Since Qin Sheng was assassinated, there must be someone behind the scenes. If something really happened to Qin Sheng, she would definitely avenge Qin Sheng, no matter what. She had lost Qin Sheng before, but she would not do it again this time. Song Ryu wiped away her tears, combed her hair, and put on some light makeup. She slowly took out her mobile phone and dialed Song Hushing's number. When the phone was connected, she said directly, "Are you satisfied this time?" Song Hushing was instantly speechless. Of course, he knew that Song Ryu was very sad at this moment. He could also hear how cold Song Ryu's voice was. He was afraid that his relationship with Song Ryu would be completely ruined. So he hurriedly explained, "Ryu, although I don't like Qin Sheng and I don't want you to be together, I'm not crazy enough to want Qin Sheng to die." Song Ryu did not believe his words. She said directly, "Song Hushing, you'd better have nothing to do with this. If I find out that you are involved in this, don't blame me for not recognizing you as my brother. This time, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. Am I that kind of person? Not to mention that you don't recognize me. The old master will break my legs." Song Hushing felt his scalp numb. He had never heard Song Ryu say such word before. Song Ryu said coldly, "Better not." After saying this, Song Ryu hung up the phone. At this moment, Song Ryu's eyes were burning. No matter who was behind the scenes, she would not spare them. Even if she went to the teacher, she would ask for an explanation. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.